2014. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Bussey?
Here.
Alder Wood?
Here.
Mayor Miller?
Here. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes of the November 3rd meeting?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, corrections, or deletions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Minutes have been approved. Sir, is there anyone here? Did you want to address the Personnel and Finance Committee at all? We have the City Council meeting coming up after this.
Okay, it's 7:30?
Yeah, at 7:30. Okay. So, all right, we'll hold till then. So there's no appearance. I'll declare the appearances section closed. There's no unfinished business this evening. All we have is item number 6A under new business is consideration of resolution 14-11-1995 is the awarding of a contract for the community center entrance ramp and railing replacement project. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
Motion second. Jake?
Good evening. This is a project approved in the 2014 capital budget for work at the Monona Community Center. The ramp entrance to the main doors of the building is not ADA, does not meet the ADA requirements. Railing is in disrepair at the end of its useful life. So this project is to reconstruct that ramp with redoing the concrete and adding new railing. And we did post this item and solicited quotes and only received one return from Hamburg Contractors. And so this
For how much?
for $31,210. And so looking to do this work yet this year, would help in our winter snow removal on that ramp and make it safer for pedestrians entering the building.
Does that seem reasonable to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of work there, especially because we've got that retaining wall as you walk up to the right, so that's removing that entire retaining wall, removing boulders, removing all the existing concrete, and you're bringing in kind of custom hand railings, coming up on both sides of the walk. So even though that we only have the one bid, it is a contractor that we have quite a bit of experience with doing quality work, and so I'm comfortable with that number.
Okay. Alder Wood.
If we don't remove and replace the railings on the main steps, which was part of the original project, when would we do that? And is this maybe the more economical time to do it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, it would, if we could do it now, it'd be great. If we don't, we'd probably just propose it in the 2016 capital budget with exterior repairs to the building.
Do you have any monies anywhere in your budgets? Do you have any slush funds?
Not really.
That would
No, I guess I probably don't really. Maybe. No? Otaker?
I'm trying to think of anything. He's usually right on his numbers came out right on what they're supposed
Can
to
you
be.
take Dan out to lunch and borrow $5,000 from Dan?
Well,
The
he's
building fund would be the only thing.
We could take it out of the building fund.
That'd be the only
Of
thing.
this year's? There's still room in this year's?
There is. We're doing the radio station. We'll take up a big chunk of that,
That's
but we
true,
still have a
forgot
little
about
room.
Yeah, it'd be like $1,200 over what we had
right,
budgeted.
because there's $3,900-ish left already. I don't know.
Yeah, we would definitely have that amount.
Would we? And that would complete it totally then?
Mm-hmm, correct.
So would the maker of the motion amend the original motion?
Yeah, I would move to amend the motion, or I would to include doing, the steps and railing on the main entryway as well.
This shouldn't affect Hamburg's quote at all, right? Other
Yeah,
than
it
some labor. But
No, that was that add-on was the lump
Yeah,
sum
that is
for
perfect.
materials and labor, the $49.95.
is there a second to the amended motion? Motion second. Further discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Bussey?
Aye.
Alder Wood?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Acceptance of the general fund accounts payable checks dated October 31st through the 13th of November. Mark?
Just, if you got any questions, just ask, but I'm going to start on page 3. Consort Display Group, banners, paid from marketing fund, the CDA. Page 4, Madison Metro. This work we're finishing up on the Broadway water main project. Page 5.
I'm sorry, how did that contract work? We're paying, these are those cross connects that we're putting across?
Yeah.
That Strand engineered?
Strange and engineered, but there is some water main replacement too.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And we're contracting the same guys who did the work for them to do our work. So
Right.
this is just
Our portion of the,
that bills us.
correct. They give us an invoice detailed out what each quantity is and things like that, so.
And is this within the budget? What
This
we-
is within what we budgeted for, yeah.
budget for the budget?
It's basically a $300,000 project.
We saved about 30% by doing it in conjunction with
Right.
Madison Met.
Page 5, McKay Nursery. Starting to use some of the right-of-way tree replacement money. It's about $4,800. Page 7, Strain and Bierbecker. Just looking at different areas, what they're working on, what areas they're working on for us right now. Page 8, Virginia Truck Center. We just, I believe we just got one of our leaf trucks. Was it leaf trucks?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, street sweeper, but
So can I just ask you, Jake, you don't need to come up, but just, who's doing the engineering on the bait shop park?
SCS is doing the engineering.
So that was the original engineer, or that's where the guy went?
That's the original contract. So they'll get us to the point of preparing bids. So then we'll put out RFP between Strand and Bierbecker to do bids and construction administration.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to go to page 14, or 13, going on 14, John Gallagher. The very top page of 14, clean, that entry feature. That was done. Lark Uniform Outfitter. We just had a new officer. This is what it costs just to outfit a new officer. That's $799, part of his uniform. Madison Metro, at the very bottom, that is our sewer cost. We run through the Madison Met and then they bill us back for each quarter. Page 15, MG&E, this would be our basically 9 months. This would be our third quarter, the last one of the third quarter. So at the next meeting, we should have another update with the solar panels. But this is each building, what it cost. Page 18, W. Davies and Sons. That's the renovation in the police department.
Is that the final bill?
I don't believe so.
They are still doing some work. They are also doing the radio station in City Hall. That work's going to start first week of December.
That's all I have. Questions?
Move approval. Second.
So motion and a second for approval. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Checks have been approved. Again, as noted, can we please, who's ever, oh, it's Leah, preparing agendas?
She'll be here tonight. And we'll talk.
Okay, let's remind her to take off miscellaneous business from the agendas.
Yep.
And moving on to item number 9, I would entertain a
adjournment.
motion for adjournment.
Second.
There's a motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Anyone who would like to speak this evening, If you could fill out a little white piece of paper, or either speak, or if you just want to register for or against something that's in the budget or on a totally different matter, please fill out one of the forms on the table and hand it to myself or someone. To order the city council meeting for Monday, November 17th, 2014. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder O'Connor. Here. Alder Holmquist.
He'll be late.
He's on his way.
He's-
Alder
yep.
Thomas. Here. Alder Bussey.
Here.
Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Spate.
Here.
Mayor Miller.
Here, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. First item of business is approval of the minutes of the October 30th meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Is there a second? Any discussion, corrections, or deletions? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes have been approved. Is there a motion for approval of the November 3rd, 2014 minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? November 3rd minutes have been approved. For the appearances section, we just have one registrant this evening, and that's Mr. Mark Reif from, is it 6706? 5706 Tecumseh. He would like to speak against the discussion regarding the property maintenance ordinance. If you could please, these are all televised for your viewing pleasure on Uverse and cable. So when you come up to speak, if you could come to the podium, please. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Reason why I'm up here, I was curious about the discussion of the putting they had a thing of trailers having to be removed, your vehicles and stuff, all be unpaved things or be put into your backyard. And I was wondering why this was taken into effect when they said it was decreasing the property value in the city of Monona. I'd like to know why that's really decreasing the property value onto it. It's been into effect here for over 25 years where a registered vehicle could be in the front as long as it was registered, and now it's not. And I'd like to know why it isn't, or why you'd like to propose this to be changed.
In the way the public hearing works, it's not an interactive discussion unless the council member has questions for clarification about your question, but I think it was pretty clear. Hopefully that will be, unfortunately, it's later in the agenda for this evening,
fine, I'll wait.
but when that's brought up, hopefully that your questions will be answered
Very good.
to your satisfaction, so thank you. Is there anyone else who wanted to address something outside of the budget? Going, gone. I declare the appearances section closed. At this point, we'll open the public hearing to receive public input regarding the proposed 2015 operating budget. And again, for any latecomers, if you would please fill out one of the discussion forms, contact forms, I'd appreciate it. So, kind of going in order of the amendments that we'll be dealing with later this evening. First is for the budget amendment for the children's librarian. The first registrant I have is Mr. Ben Redding of 6019 Queens Way. Would like to speak in favor. Ben? And next, Sally Buffett will follow Ben.
Thank you. Just wanted to, on behalf of the library board, well, I'm Ben Redding, president of the library board, and wanted to speak in favor of the amendment to add a part-time children's librarian. Two quick points in favor of adding this part-time position. At the library, we have seen, and we have discussed this in past city council meetings too, that I've been to anyway, we've seen a pretty substantial increase, and we continue to see an increase in programming demand at the library. And probably our most popular programs are children's programming. adding a part-time position allows us to not only just generally do more children's programming, but it also helps us get programming in on weeknights and weekends when we currently don't have a lot of this kind of programming. So that helps not only meet the demand that's there now. We've also heard in the past how the Monona Library is sort of the greater community's gateway into Monona, and certainly children's programming is one of our most popular draws, so it's a great family attraction feature. Second point, with this added staff member, we're hoping to increase our outreach to schools and daycare centers and really anywhere that we can reach kids. It's a big step in helping improve kids' comfortability with the library, coming to the library, knowing how to get around, adding literacy programs, working in partnership with the school district if we can, things of that nature. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Sally? Followed by Anna Swagan.
Good evening, Sally Buffett. Many of the points that Ben Redding already addressed, I wanted to touch on just a few others. Karen Wendt has been our children's librarian here for 30 years. She's celebrating her 30th anniversary in the year 2014. And I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge Karen and her commitment to the City of Monona and her service to the library. Adding an additional half-time position would enable the library to do those night and weekend story time programs and have approximately 50 more programs per year. And Karen is launching a new initiative in 2015. It's called 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten. That's an enormous undertaking, and this half-time position could really help with that. Then there's the outreach with the Monona Grove School District, and over the course of the years, Karen has tried to get into the school district, into all of the schools, to introduce how the library could interface, and that's fallen off. So she needs help to get that connection back with the school district. And just the family attraction component, I really want to emphasize that keeping Monona vital to young families is really important, and our mission here at the library is to serve all of the community. So I'd like to ask for your support for adding a half-time librarian. Thanks.
Thank you. Anna Swagan, 6008 Winnequa Road. Welcome.
Good evening, Board. I want to thank you all for coming out on this cold night and for all the countless hours that you devote to making sure that our city is a wonderful place to live. I think that the library is one of the essential factors of a community, and it's a symbol for the health of a community. And one of the wonderful things about our library is that we are known basically throughout the state as an innovative, creative, and fun place for children and families to gather. And I have talked to people from other parts of the state even who say that they follow the newsletter of this particular library and often come up with ideas that they can apply to their libraries. And so I just think we're kind of a flagship, hold a flagship position, and I feel very, very good about that. Our current librarian, children's librarian, Karen Wendt, who is a 30-year veteran of the library and has given countless hours, and just a good example of the commitment that we have on the part of the staff. But she has introduced, as Sally mentioned, a lot of different programs and has done quite a bit in bridging with the schools and cooperating with them, and then done some parenting education and parenting, helping parents learn how to teach their children how to study and how to have fun with mathematics and how to enjoy storytelling. And so there's and I really like when our city can reach out to the schools and have these bridging programs because it just, I think it strengthens both the core of the cities and the schools. Some of the wonderful programs that are going on right now, I don't know if any of you have brought a child to the reading where you bring your child and they read a story to the dog, but that's very popular with the kids around our neighborhood. And they also have a bedtime story time when the kids bring their little dolls and toys, and then they leave them overnight, and then they come and get them in the morning. So I think those kind of things are, what happens is that the library becomes an exciting place to come. It's a place to build community, and it's a very, as I said before, creative outreach. So looking at the fact that there's only one children's librarian now at 80%, I'm so grateful to Alderman Doug Wood, who put forth this amendment to add the part-time children's librarian, and I hope that you agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig Oswego, I have you both as a speaker and a registrant. Did you wish to speak? Yes. Craig Oswego, 6008 Winnequa Road, followed by Mr. Todd Stebbins.
Actually, I'd like to speak about the leaf removal. I would like to thank
Not on
you.
the agenda this evening.
I know. I'm just kidding.
It's untouchable.
My name is Craig Oswego, and I've lived at 6008 Winnequa Road and have been a resident for over 43 years. I practiced dentistry for 40 of those years, and I've seen the impact that a good library has on a community with the children that I treated as well as my own children. When we decided to move to Monona, we had a selective process and wanted a community that had a good school system, had a good library, and of course we all know and are appreciative of the beautiful park system that we have here. And so we chose Monona to live here for those reasons. We'd like to see that continue. From a selfish point of view, I'd like to see my real estate taxes remain the same, or I'd be more than willing to increase those if it's necessary, but I'd like to see my real estate value continue. I am a recent new grandfather to a grandson, and I had to take care of my 19-month-old granddaughter, and I found myself reading books to her. I think the importance of reading to young children is very important, and I found it to be very, very exhausting, but a good situation to bond with my granddaughter. And I know the importance of reading at an early age for children, and I'm very much in favor of this amendment, and I hope you will give it some serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Todd Stebbins, 5005 McKenna Road, followed by Brett Blommy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, City Council members. Appreciate this opportunity very much. I want to touch on a couple of what I consider to be actually like 5 of the critical issues around our request for a part-time children's librarian. First and foremost, this will give us an opportunity to expand services, particularly evenings and weekends, because of the ability with Karen Went being limited to 32 hours a week. We expect that this will allow us an additional 50 more story times and a couple of dozen other kinds of activities, reaching, we hope, an estimated 1,000 additional participants in those programs. The outreach of the library outreach will be expanded by the addition of this position, especially to off-site locations, such as daycare centers. But also, we intend to expand our collaboration with the K-12 system, and we've got talks with our director already underway to do some of that. Additionally, I would add that the changing demographic in Monona is pretty obvious to many of us, and I don't have the data in front of me, but when I'm out and about, I see a lot more children in neighborhoods. I think we're experiencing quite a turnover, and I see more children at church as well, and I think it's important to consider reaching those new members of our community as well. Library services are changing, there's no question about that in the 21st century, but there is one constant that remains, and I think that's the introduction of children to the wonders of reading, and hope very much that you'll support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Brett Blamy, 131 Shado Lane, Terrace? You just wanted to register in favor. All right. And then I have a number registering in favor of the library resolution. Yes to the halftime position from Karen Wendt, 1218 South Thompson Drive, in favor. In favor is Teresa Cunningham, 5511 Brant Place. In favor is Leslie Johnson, 106 Parkway Drive, is in favor of the halftime librarian. Amy Babula is in favor of the part-time librarian from 1209 East Main Street in Stoughton. Clyde Drake is in favor of the halftime librarian, and adds there are a few things free to all members of the community, like the library. Karen Spiracek, did I screw that one? Spivak. Okay, excuse me, Karen. Karen wanted to register in favor of the children's librarian position, 1730 Baird Street in Madison. Andrew Spivak, 1730 Baird Street, would like to register in favor of the library position. And then a number of residents and people sent in email requests, and I won't read but they're a public record, but there were a lot of what you've heard tonight, some very nice compliments towards the library, and all in favor of the addition of the part-time librarian, starting with Ann Dorn of 5212 Tonawatha, Pat Howell, 4324 Winnequa Road. These are all in favor of adding part-time librarian. Kathy Bernards, 5104 Midmore Road. Aaron Staver, 6201 Winnequa Road. Paul Johnson, 106 Parkway Drive. Teresa Adams, 4904 Shore Acres Road. And finally, Sue Carr, 4209 Winnequa Road. And all of those were registrants online in favor of the librarian. Moving on to the next budget amendment, people that wish to speak, I first have Chris Vernig of 2013 Carver Street would like to register in favor of budget amendment 1503, which is one of the fire department amendments. He's registering in favor. Jeremy Small is registering in favor of amendment 1503. Dan Eckloff is registering in favor of budget amendments 1503 and 1504. Jeremy Small is registering in favor of amendment 1504. Chris Vernig is registering in favor of budget amendment 1504. Robert Nelson would like to speak against amendment 1505. Mr. Nelson? Followed by, as I always introduce him, the nice Bob Miller of 5506 Winnequa Trail. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for allowing me to speak tonight. I was at the last meeting and spoke quite at,
Second.
What?
Could we read the amendment so the
Oh.
audience knows what it is?
Certainly. 1503 was the first one of those amendments that I referenced.
He's talking 1505, I think.
Right. But just so if they want to know any of the amendments. 1503 was to add $35,000 to be allocated by the council to carry out the direction of the task force for fire/EMS coverage. 1504, which was referenced, is to add $18,000 for fire/EMS limited term employees to be paid for, and we'll get into the details on that. And the one that Mr. Nelson's speaking about is Budget Amendment 1505, which is to decrease fire overtime by $5,000 and firefighter recruitment and retention by $10,000. Also to decrease emergency medical services overtime by $5,000. Okay, excuse us.
thank you. I spoke quite at length at your last meeting regarding what is essentially 1503 and '04, and I'm very happy that you took time to discuss that, think about it, and those of you who made an effort to try to find funding for that. So I didn't register specifically, but I am in favor of those two amendments. In the light of those amendments, however, and the discussion at the last meeting, I failed to see the logic in then removing money that would provide recruitment, retention, and kind of the ongoing things that we need to do to find new members, keep those that are on the department, and get them to show up for events, fires, and the like. So it seems like a step forward and a step backwards in a way, and I think that the whole discussion is about staffing levels. It's about getting people to work, and I would oppose 1505 without some better explanation of where that takes us. We've been getting squeezed year after year at the fire department. We generate some revenue through the EMS, but the budget keeps squeezing 2%, 2%, 2% each year, and it's down to the personnel and the paper clips pretty much at this point. And we really need that extra funding, or the existing funding anyway, to continue the work that we're doing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hold on one second. Alder Bussey might have a question.
You support 1504 and the reduction in overtime and firefighter retention that are listed in 1504, correct?
I believe that there was a recognition that some overtime would be saved by having some scheduling flexibility with another person, and that was my understanding.
But you're comfortable, basically what 1504 does is it brings in an LTE, and then to fund that, there's some reductions in the overtime and the recruit retention and the part-time wage. So you're comfortable with that?
I guess I didn't see all of that in 1504, but
okay.
But the LTE and the progression eventually to a full-time person is what I was kind of focused on there. I didn't.
Alder Thomas?
Just a comment. I did check with the chief before I put in the reductions in overtime to fund that, and he was comfortable with it.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Robert Miller, 5506 Winnequa Trail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for having us here tonight for the hearing. I'm in opposition of 1505. I'll give you a little history. I'm a lifelong resident of Monona, 59 years. I've been on the fire department 34, and before that I was, as a charter member of the EMS. I started on the EMS 2 years before that. So I've been around almost as long as Alderman Thomas. And I just say that so that you know I didn't fall off the apple cart yesterday. You know, I've watched the fire department EMS since the beginning as a charter member of the EMS, and a lot has changed. In the early days, there was a lot of camaraderie. The demands on the volunteer weren't as much, and you could recruit a lot of people because you did a lot of activities together. We did a lot of things at the station. The training wasn't as rigorous. Now it's a different time, and I've never come and asked for more. I think a long time ago with Mayor Litchfield, we asked for some support for the full-time staff. But now is the time that we are really low on volunteers. The ones we have are good. Some of them are my age, and you get to be around my age, and it gets to be harder to crawl through the fires and get your kids out of the fires, or go into WPS where there's hundreds of people and you know, try to get them out. And that's one reason we need more staffing. I was going to mention my wife was an EMT. I met her with the fire department. My son Joe is a lieutenant, volunteer with the fire department and a paramedic. And our younger staff, I have concerns in the future that they're going to be safe enough with the limited staffing. NFPA has certain requirements for staffing at structure fires, house fires, building fires. I've attended conferences of chiefs that have come to talk that show the number of personnel that you need at a working fire. And it's a lot. When we go in, we have to have a search and rescue team. We have to have an attack team. We don't go in unless we have a backup team. We want a rapid intervention team in case a wall would collapse as we're going in to get your son and daughter to help get us out. We have to have sector officers, both geographical and functional. There's many duties, safety officers. There's many duties on a fire scene as it gets bigger and bigger. Now, yes, we can get mutual aid, but if you look at the time to when we get the fire call, get to the scene, and call the county and say, we need mutual aid, they page out Cottage Grove or McFarland or Town of Madison. We're looking at 15, 20-minute delay. A fire can double in size in that time. So if you imagine you're at home and you're anxious, you want, come on, get in there. We've got our 2 full-time staff. We may have an intern. We may have a couple of volunteers. Every night is different. One of the things that's changed, and that's why I was talking about the history, is in the old days we did have a big EMS. It has dwindled. So we always had one staff member back if there was a fire call to roll an engine. The things that have changed is now we go on calls to assist EMS. Many of the buildings are alarmed now. A lot of buildings. We're back in the old days, they weren't alarmed. So we get a lot of false alarms, the Walmarts, the Taco Bells, the Tolarian. Last night or Saturday night at 1 in the morning, it was the Pancake House. It was a water flow alarm. And so we're getting pulled out in the middle of the night a lot. You might have an important meeting the next day. You might be going to a family birthday party. I know when we did a lot of boating, my wife would turn and look at me, and you're going to cover the station, really? And you have to look at the amount of work, the amount of, it's easy to say, okay, the volunteers are going to cover it. But on any given day, say like Thanksgiving, some might be out of town, some might have had a glass of wine. If I have a beer, I can't respond to your call. And so then you start, looking at the numbers, and I won't go on and on here. The safety is our number one concern, both for our full-time staff, where we only have 2 on, and maybe an intern, and for our newer firefighters, our younger firefighters. My son, in the future, I'm hoping we have enough firefighters that when we get a structure fire or we've got somebody trapped, We've got firefighters that can get in there and quickly and get them out. So every other community around us has had paid on call. Fitchburg, Verona, Cottage Grove, Blooming Grove, and they seem successful. Some of them have more open borders, like Maple Bluff. They'll take in students from MATC, pay them a stipend, and they get their staffing that way. We have sent out flyers. We've tried a lot of stuff. I've talked to my neighbors. People are more busy now. They have more hobbies. They work, both spouses work. And they'll say, man, I'd like to, but we just don't have the time. I think by trying the paid on call, I really think that we can put out a campaign. We can get more volunteers in. We can get the young guys interested. And this will at least cover their gas money for the call after call. And hopefully we can get our staffing up. Because it is at a point now where it's starting to be dangerous. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And not only do we have the same name, we're the same age. I didn't know that before.
I live on Winnequa.
And we both live on Winnequa. What day is your birthday, Bob? Next, I have registered Kristen Halverson would like to register against budget cutting fire department, which I assume, Kristen, is 1505, which Officer Miller, yep. And also regarding budget amendment 1505, Dan Eckloff would like to register against 1505. All right, and then I have a couple who would like to speak in general sense on the budget. I have Mr. Eric Redding, 507 West Wilson Street, Madison, would like to speak in favor of the cable budget. Eric.
Thank you, Mayor Miller and the council, for the chance to speak. I will try to be brief. I've sat through many of these meetings and know how long they can go. Speaking in favor of the media budget, and more specifically Alderman O'Connor and Alderman Thomas's amendment to increase the part-time wages. As you all know, the media department has gone through many changes in the last year. In 2015 is going to be another big year with the launch of the radio station. We've set some very ambitious goals for Will and the department, and we need to make sure that we give him the resources to accomplish those goals. Well, I think there are several things we can try and do to help him. I think the biggest thing we can do is provide him with the staff that he needs to accomplish those goals. The current assistant coordinator is dedicated to the department. He's incredibly talented, and he works very well with the students, and he's a major asset, I think, to the department. So I would encourage you all to support the amendment to increase the hours of the assistant coordinator and make sure that he sticks around and we can continue to see the great progress we've made in the last few months under Will. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Christy Schilling, 5708 Monona Drive, would like to register in favor and speak for the hotel tax budget. Regarding this, just as a point of clarification so everyone's clear, this was an amendment that what I proposed in the mayor's budget, which is a revenue share on the hotel room tax. Monona's been grandfathered, that we are not required to provide those monies for marketing, and that they've historically been used in the general fund. I'm proposing at a set rate, anything above the 2010, I believe, is what this year's determination point is, that we would share that to assist in the marketing of Monona going forward. I bring that up only because that will require a council resolution to change that, which will happen at a date later in time, but your speaking tonight's appropriate because it's fresh in the budget. So thank you, Christy. Welcome.
All right. My name is Christy Schilling. I'm the Executive Director of the Monona Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here this evening, and thank you especially to Mayor Bob for allowing this to be a topic of discussion amongst the city. Many chambers in our area receive room tax dollars as mandated by a state statute that was issued in 1994. Monona is one of a handful of cities that does not have to abide by this statute. To my understanding, the reason you were grandfathered in is because at the time of the statute, the city did not have an established tourism entity. While I realize that the grandfathered status is completely beyond your control, I commend you for taking time to re-examine the situation as it currently is established. I would also respectfully ask that you take time to consider if it truly serves the city of Monona's best interest to continue to use the room tax dollars in the general fund rather than for marketing purposes as the state statute intended. For clarification, the state statute mandates that 70% of room tax dollars collected be used for marketing, resulting in increased room nights as a result of tourism or corporate travel. This is what many of our neighboring communities are doing at present. Previously, I worked at the Fitchburg Chamber Visitor and Business Bureau as the communications director. My job was partially funded through room tax dollars. I worked to promote the chamber and recruit new members and businesses to our area, but then I also dedicated a portion of my time toward tourism development and increasing room nights and room tax revenue. Our nearest neighboring chambers that receive room tax dollars are Fitchburg, who's currently negotiating new higher rates with the city at 50%, and Verona at 70%. Middleton has a tourism council, so since 2001, their chamber has not received room tax dollars, and they focus solely on chamber work. Their tourism council receives 100% and focuses solely on tourism promotion. Verona is slated to have 2 new hotels soon, and their room tax revenue is going to be projected to be upwards of $500,000 per year, and they'll be using 70% of that marketing tourism in their community. I would like to see us competing with these communities for additional room nights, business recruitment, and further discussions with developers. I have looked at Monona's room tax dollar history as published by the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance in this publication. Unfortunately, because not a lot of concentration has been spent on promoting tourism and hotels here in Monona, this publication shows that the dollars have been on a bit of a decline. I don't have access to those specific numbers like at present, but that's what this shows up to 2010. This also means that there's less revenue coming into the general fund. In a time where city budgets are constantly being trimmed, it would be prudent for you to look at creative ways that we can work together to improve the bottom line through increasing our room nights. I've spoken with Erica Waller, the GM at the Country Inn & Suites, and she extends her full support for the chamber receiving a portion of room tax to use for marketing this as the statute intends. On October 30th, the Capital Times published an article about Madison's room tax dollar arrangement and their use of those dollars to support the Monona Terrace. In that article, Tricia Pugel, the president of the Wisconsin Hotel and Lodging Association, did state that her organization is planning to pursue a new room tax reform package to help remedy the room tax problems around the state, pointing directly to cities that keep 100% for the general fund and that don't comply with the state statute. She also said that the bottom line is that it's hard for local tourism to grow without using the room tax as it's intended, end quote. So change may be coming in the near future, so I encourage you to take a proactive approach and make the changes before they are mandated. Let's just say a new hotel was looking to locate in Monona. If that hotelier sees that other communities are receiving room tax dollars dedicated to marketing purposes and increasing room nights, doesn't that give other communities an edge over us? If you were a hotelier, how might that affect your decision of where to locate your new property? Then there's also the multiplier effect to consider. Bringing more room nights to Monona can lead directly to increased spending at our local restaurants and other retail establishments. Other business owners will see them thriving and they'll want to locate here as well. If we want to be competitive with our neighbors and get Monona on a regional map, this is where we need to start. The city is already receiving the lion's share of room tax. It's time for us to get moving and start marketing this great city and all of its assets. If you give this some serious thought, I think you'll see that it's in the community's best interest to dedicate as many dollars toward these efforts as you possibly can. We're in an age where if you're not out there marketing your community or your business or your municipality, whatever the entity may be, you're not going to gain market share and you're going to struggle to prevent losses. For the first time in the history of your local chamber, you have a marketing professional with a proven track record that can help guide us to a position on a regional stage. Let's say the chamber dedicates 25 hours to marketing for heads and beds, as it's called, And because marketing isn't instantaneous, let's say there's a decrease in room tax for 2015. Under this proposed arrangement, the chamber would get nothing, and we could take a loss for those hours invested. It'd be a major hit to the financial stability of our organization. In order to mitigate this unfavorable situation for the chamber, I would like to propose a guaranteed minimum of at least $10,000 a year with 70% of share of dollars above the base rate. Receiving only 50% above the base rate of room tax collected in 2014 is going to be very limiting for our ability to, for our community's ability to stay competitive in a regional market. Other neighboring communities are receiving 50 to 100% of the entire room tax collected. So I encourage you to consider a minimum of 70% above the base rate for sharing. It's still not even close to what the state statute mandates or close to what our neighboring cities are dedicating to marketing. Once these dollars go into the city's general fund, the chance of taking them out is highly unrealistic. You know, we see needs like the fire department and new police cars. The chamber can serve as the marketing arm for the city if we have room tax dollars to work with. If we work together, I really believe we can do amazing things and get Monona on a regional map. We can increase our hotel nights, our power to recruit new businesses, and improve the city's revenue through the room tax dollars. Plus, you know, maybe in 5 years or so, we'd be able to rebrand as a tourism bureau and dedicate even more time and effort and money toward increasing the room tax revenue. Billions of dollars are coming into the state of Wisconsin for tourism. I'd like to see us gain a little more of that market share. So thank you for your time and consideration. I do have one document to hand out to everyone. It's a spreadsheet showing the difference between the 70% above base and the 50% base. You see it's very minimal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then finally, unless there's somebody else, and you're still welcome to turn in a slip if you'd like to address the council this evening. One more on the hotel tax. Carrie Foose, 6210 Winnequa Road, would also like to speak in support and register in support of the hotel tax. Carrie?
Thank you all for being here tonight. I am honored to be one of, I think, the newest appointees to the Board of Directors for the Monona Chamber of Commerce. I took that seat knowing that I was new and fresh and had no idea what went into running a chamber. I thank Christy for being here tonight. I appreciate Christy for looking for alternative cooperative sources of funding for our chamber. Our chamber is so fortunate to have a board of directors that are business owners that have been in the community for years and years and years. The stability of this community owes a lot to those folks who've invested their entire lives to running businesses here. I'll admit wholeheartedly that I am brand new business owner. I've lived here for 20 years, but now I have investment dollars at stake. It is critical for us to jump into the new arena of attracting businesses. Again, many longtime business owners here have invested so much of their time and their lives in keeping this community vibrant, but we're finding more and more every day. Every time we have a new event, I'm talking with people who want to do business here. I have a meeting with another chamber board member on Wednesday, somebody very interested in moving their business to Monona, both on the manufacturing side and the retail side. I may have an opportunity to play a very small role in helping them achieve that, but we need to be relevant in how we're marketing to these people. We need to be able to attract these people with things like statistics on room tax. Who are we attracting? Do we have the capacity to support these people as they bring investors into the community? They want to stay here. They want to understand what this community is all about. We certainly have an incredible story to tell, and I think that with the support of the city and with the support of additional marketing dollars above and beyond what we can create by having new events and attracting people from outside the community in to see what we're all about, we need these funds to be able to be relevant to these people, to show them exactly. We have a story to tell, and we need to make a sale, but we need, and full disclosure, I'm a marketer by trade, so I understand how important financial investment is in moving that cause forward. Would very much appreciate the city's consideration of this because I think it would go a long, long way in taking our chamber to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the council on the budget this evening? Last call. All right. I will declare the budget appearances section closed. Moving on to the consent agenda, there is none this evening. Under item G, council action items, unfinished business. Item G1, letter A, is consideration of resolution 14-11-1991, which is authorizing a contract with Vanderwall and Associates Incorporated for their planning services for the waterfront redevelopment master plan in the city of Monona. This was brought forth by the CDA. Is there a motion for approval? Yes, Alder Bussey.
I'd like to recuse myself from items 1A, 1B, and 1C.
All right, you are recused. Is there a motion for?
Second.
There's a motion and second for approval. Pat?
Yeah, this, as you'll recall from our last meeting, this first item would call for services from Vanderwall in association with doing the master plan for the 8-acre triangle parcel located at Bridge and Broadway. This service would take us through the first couple months in 2015 and would get us to the point where we would have a solid plan in terms of layout and uses for that property.
Further discussion? Again, this was discussed at length at the last meeting, so it's not that we're just rushing through these points. Further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey. Excuse me. Alder Wood.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 1B is consideration of resolution 14-11-1992, the authorizing of a contract with Vanderwall and Associates for planning services for development management assistance in the city of Monona, Wisconsin, again brought forth by the CDA. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Mr. Marsh?
Yeah, this is stage 2 of the planning process brought forth by Vanderwall. Would basically take us through the planning and development phase in 2015. In addition to the master plan, site plan development that this council just approved a second ago, this would take us into ongoing negotiations with developers as well as other potential partners in that development through the end of this year. So this is just ongoing planning services and development services with Vanderwall through December 31st, 2015.
Further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey. Why am I calling your name? Sorry.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 1C is consideration of resolution 14-11-1993, which is approving the boundaries of a redevelopment area number 9, finding such area to be blighted, and approving a redevelopment plan for said redevelopment area, brought forth by the CDA again. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Mr. Marsh?
Yes, this basically approves the plan that was brought forth a few weeks to this body, defining the boundaries of that redevelopment area 9, which includes the triangle, as I mentioned earlier, Bridge, Broadway, and the river, that area in there, along with 3 properties south of the intersection at Bridge and Broadway. That would be the Monona Gardens, the DiMaggio Tire, and the daycare properties. I would like to note that we have 2 filed objections, and that is the process in which property owners can object to being within that redevelopment area, and that includes the yacht club located on the Yahara River there within the triangle, and then DiMaggio Tire is located south of that intersection. So those are two filed objections to this.
Questions, discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Finally, item G, 1D, is consideration of Resolution 14-11-1990, which is the adoption of the 2015 operating budget and establishing a tax levy brought forth by the mayor. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and second. Mr. Hotecker, as our financial director, would you want to do the overview of where we are before we move into amendments? Yep, just especially for those viewing and to know kind of, and if we can go over again in terms of the levy limits imposed upon us by the state, so we know what our cannot exceed number is. Yes, Alder Thomas?
Can I ask
Yep.
him to add another piece, and that is the consequences of our not using levy? What happens next year? Do we lose it? Can we carry it over?
Okay, I'll start with that question. Well, actually, let me start from the beginning and get to that question, if that's okay. Right now, the levy limit is based on a new construction number. So the state says you can either increase your levy by 0 or whatever the new construction number is. To get, our new construction number was 1.14%. To get just 1%, it's about, you have to have about $12 to $13 million of new construction. And we had roughly a little over 12, I can't remember the exact number, over $12 million. So that gave us approximately $64,563 we could increase the operating levy. We did not, last year we did not go to the full levy over the last couple of years. So what the state does, they say you can carry that over, but you can't use all of it at once, so they give us a portion at a time. So right now, we're able to carry over $51,379. So total, we can increase our operating levy. It's $115,942.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
$115,942. This excludes debt service, operating only. Debt service is exempt from the levy limit. The actual increase, excluding debt service, is $59,035 for the operating side, which gives us a difference of $56,907 with that. So we're $57,000 under our levy limit. Basically, kind of answer Alderman Thomas's. A couple things with that. You are allowed to carry some over, but you're not allowed to carry it all at once. We won't get that whole $56,000 next year. It'll be amortized over a couple of years. The state will give it back to us. The other thing is, her question was basically if you don't go to the levy, what happens next year? You start that 1%, or say if we whatever our new construction, I'm just going to say 1%. Say our 1%. We'll start on what our actual tax levy increase was. Will be the 1%. So you do lose that little bit of a gap of the 50. If you don't go to levy, you leave that 56,907, I guess, on the table. You don't. That's not factored into the equation. They go to what you actually levied. So if you're going up to the levy limit, then the next 1% starts on whatever number you end on. So there is a little bit. Say 56,907 of 1% of that. That would be what you'd be out next year.
So to clarify, as we begin the process of dealing with amendments this evening, if we take the budget, the mayor's budget, as proposed,
yep,
the levy limit would be, or where are we in relationship to the levy limit?
We are $56,907 under the levy limit.
All right. So as we go through the proposals tonight, the amendments, we'll need to keep track. We have 56,000 before we hit the
Before we have to
ceiling.
use some type of other source. Yes.
Okay.
But if
Alder
we don't-
Thomas?
But if we don't use it this year, and we can't use it next year,
The state won't give you the full amount, no. You have,
how much do we lose?
will be amortized over the life, or a couple more years. We'll probably get about half of that.
Okay, thank you.
So about 27,000, 28,000. Any other questions as we go in? All right. So the way this process will work, we have a number of budget amendments brought forth by at least two members of the council. We will keep a running total, and Mark will keep us updated. And as it stands right now, so where the rubber meets the road to a taxpayer, what would the tax increase or non-increase be with the current budget?
So an actual...
For an average, the proverbial average homeowner in
Yeah,
Monona.
we talk about the average home, which is kind of an estimate based on this year to last year. So last year was 240, now it's about 260. So if you increase exactly those amounts, the percentages, and then you're going to see about, I believe, $80 increase with that.
On a 260.
260.
Which you might note, for those who kept copious notes from the last meeting, has improved some. Mark got some new data points, so that was $100 last
Yeah,
time, and
now it's
now it's
down
down
by
to 80 on
I
a
get the exact number if you need it.
$260,000 house. If your house increased $20,000 in its assessed value, you're looking at about 80, less than 1%.
Yeah, residential went up this year compared to...
But we'll keep track of that, and at the end of the night, we'll have a wonderful number to share with you to give you a head start on our tax paying. So, any questions with that? All right, and then I guess we will start with the amendments. And can you guys make sure Mark's screen is up on both screens or one of the screens, or just so we can follow along with Mr. Hotecker? Thank you. All right, budget number 15-01 is to reduce the muffin fees from, this is not baking, this is computer bandwidth, the muffin fees from $8,400 to $3,600 per year, which is a decrease of $4,800, brought forth by Alders O'Connor and Wood. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Alder O'Connor?
In the administrator's original budget, he had proposed $40,900 for technology service contracts, and the question of how much we are going to pay for access to Muffin, which is what the Metropolitan Unified Fiber Network. Access. If we were going to access it for the entire, all four buildings in the city, it would have been $8,400 per year. We met, the city administrator and I and the IT consultants and some other people involved with this to discuss this, because we weren't sure if we wanted to go the full route or not, and we determined that we, for now, will just pay for access between City Hall and the Public Works building. And they will, if we will continue using our current charter service for now. Our contract with Charter is up at the end of September, and we may reconsider this in the future. If we go with Muffin, that will allow us to have a lot more bandwidth, but right now we think we're okay with what we have, at least for now. I do have some concerns about streaming from the radio station, but we're going to be able to see how that goes between April and September. So this would just decrease the amount that had been budgeted by $4,800, because to just have Muffin between Public Works and City Hall would be $3,600. So.
Further questions? Here, yes, Alder Holmquist.
Last statement, $3,600 or $36,000?
$3,600.
So if the whole line items, oh, I see.
Well, that includes other contracts too.
Right.
Further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment passes. Budget Amendment 15-02 is to add a permanent part-time professional librarian for the Children/Youth Services beginning March 1st, 2015, in the amount of $20,000, $20,594. This was brought forth by Alders Wood and Thomas. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Alder Wood?
Well, I think the speakers earlier did a good job of explaining the benefits of this proposal. The only thing I would highlight for the council is that this amendment would start the position March 1st. So the cost next year would be slightly higher than this.
Alder Thomas?
Yeah, just a couple of comments and why I support this. Times have changed a lot, and when we think about daytime program, that's quite wonderful. But parents aren't around so much during the day. They're at work. If they're going to do things with their children, they're going to do it on evenings and weekends. And it's important that we meet this need because it will not only bring those children, but their parents to the library. Secondarily, about 30% of the students at Winnequa qualify for free and reduced meals, which means they're low income. For them, a library is really critically important, and it's critically important to get their parents there who may not like the schools as much as we'd like them to. And so, and I think we have to look forward to how do we increase our usership of the library, but more importantly, how do we serve the needs of people who might not be able to bring their children so much Monday through Friday, 10 to 5. So our horizon has grown, and we need to meet that need, and I think this does that.
Further, Alder Bussey, Alder Holmquist?
There's a couple of items on the agenda tonight that they're great ideas. This, the fire department, also I think there's IT. What I struggle with is we could make it work for this budget, but what position are we putting ourselves in the future? Mark said that we could grow maybe 50 grand next year. The levy might be able to go up around $50,000. Our transportation aid's going to be dropping. The library fund income is going to be dropping. And our health care has averaged, what, 80 grand the last 2 years in increase? How are we going to pay for that? Are we going to paint ourselves into a corner if we commit to these positions? And I'm open, they're great positions, but how are we going to long-term, how are we going to be able to sustain that? I don't have an answer.
Alder Holmquist and Alder Thomas?
I have some similar concerns about adding this position, although I support the foundational concept of early literacy skills and the importance of this position as it meets that ongoing need. And when I go back to some of the comments that have been made at the original medium, the council of the original rollout of this, and then even tonight, and with some of the emails I received, two pieces for me continue to kind of be at the front of my mind. One is this idea of how do we look forward for the services of our library and the changing scenery of our library, as our director has indicated that libraries are changing. And the one piece of a library that continues to stay the same and that I hear is children programming. Although we have a variety of resources that serve many pieces of our library, if they are shifting, I think it's important that we concentrate on that strategic planning that is coming up soon to look at, are there better ways to use resources that we have now to meet these growing needs? And if not, and we need to add additional staff, we need to have that conversation as well. and how do we kind of sustain that over the long haul. An added piece with that has to do with the collaboration regarding K-12 schooling. And the reason that one kind of rings in my ear is I work for a school district. What's interesting about that is what that really means. Is this to augment the responsibility that our school districts have for literacy skills? Is this to look at specific reading interventions? Is it targeted interventions? So there are a variety of things, and if they are related to those levels of services, there are different funding sources to tap that. If they aren't, and it's to augment other pieces, if it's to have programming for students that might be latchkey kids, that's a different need than the need for literacy skills attached to particular students from K-12. And I see Eric coming up, so that's a good sign.
I appreciate the question, Alder Holmquist. We're really in the beginning exploratory phase working with the Monona Grove School District. This is a discussion, and it was really the 30% statistic from Winnequa that really was the light bulb that went over my head this summer. That was a bombshell, essentially, that there's a huge swath of Monona that probably is not using the library, and these are people that could definitely benefit from Karen's services and the rest of our services. So I think the strategic plan, Alder Holmquist, will start to narrow down what that collaboration with the school district will be. For the immediate 2015, my goal with this position is to really focus on what we're currently doing and to build on that. I think the fact that we do 270 children's programs. Children's circulation accounts for about 40% of our total circulation. And we do it all with a fantastic children's librarian who by choice does not work full time. I think it speaks to how successful we are. That said, as many of the speakers have said, we could do a lot more. And so I agree that the upcoming strategic plan that we're going to be partaking in 2015 is going to be very, very critical to these longer term discussions. And I'm also very cognizant of the budget icebergs that are floating in front of us. That said, this position will pay immediate dividends, and I think when it's time to start talking about long-term staffing and resource allocation, the strategic plan next year will speak to that. So I think for 2015, this position will enable us to really just grow our services and see how far we can go.
Can you speak to the issue of the resources you have and the variety of areas that those resources are deployed, and how there's been ongoing conversations about how that's shifting, and we've installed other devices to help reduce down labor costs for shelving, and all those things have helped me understand why it is we wouldn't kind of take what was in the right hand and put it in the left hand.
The difference is, and Children's Services is kind of its own unique subset within the discipline of librarianship. It's a skill that I have a degree, I have 10 years of professional library experience. I could not be a children's librarian. They like me, but they don't want to go to story time with me. It's just not a skill set that I have. The person that we would hire ideally would be coming out of library school, and they would essentially have spent the last year of their graduate school experience training to be a children's librarian. It's a discipline that is unique to children's librarianship. We currently have 3 librarians, if you count Karen, which I do, 2 adult librarians, Tony Streckert and Emily Goad, and Karen. And as great as Emily and Tony are, they're not children's librarians. So I couldn't say, go and do that. Just like in a school setting, you wouldn't have a history teacher go and teach math, hopefully.
Alder Thomas. And Alder O'Connor.
I'm going to try and not sound like a crabby old lady, but I am quite annoyed that the state is limiting or is trying to limit what we as a council or what some of us believe in our heart of hearts is in the best interest of this community. I mean, I just think that we need this stuff, the people want it, they're willing to pay for it, and so I'm annoyed that we have to sort of squirrel around to figure out how we're going to do this. But I do think it's doable, and I've thought about this for a long time, Mr. Mayor, and I've talked to Pat a little bit about some of this stuff, and we've got stuff coming online. We've got 2 apartment projects that are new construction that will add to it. Our room tax for the moment is going to go up. We didn't take any money out of that, but my understanding is that that will be higher than what it is. And in 2019, TIF 2 will come online. We will get money from that. If we keep a reserve in our fund balance, well, we should not on a regular basis pay for operations out of fund balance. You can for a couple of years sustain yourself till this other money comes online. So I personally, Alderman Bussey, am quite comfortable that there will be enough. Now, maybe the legislature will do something, and maybe they'll say you can't raise the levy at all, and then we'll really be in a pickle. And maybe they'll say you can raise it, maybe it doesn't exist anymore. But we have to do what we think is right for today, and there are resources to cover these things in the next 4 years. But are there any guarantees? No. But I think it's responsible to do what we believe is in the best interest of the community and what they want. And we have the resources to do it this year. We have the resources to do it next year.
And if I might, Alder O'Connor, please indulge me just 1 second. And this goes to what Alder Thomas is speaking about, but goes to the original points, I believe, that are brought up by Alder Bussey. And I'm just looking to Mark for clarification. Libraries are a bit of a different animal in city government and what can and can't be done between the city and the library system. And I just want to have for clarification, sometimes it's easier to give to the library and never take back. And that's very simplistically put, but I'm not sure if, so if we would allocate dollars, and then realize because of strategic planning and other things that changes were to be made, we can't implement those. So it's simplistically put, but could you clarify just so everyone knows how libraries work in relationship to the city?
Technically, the city council really doesn't have much control over the library money. Technically, we give the money to them, they can spend it on however they want to, but we request budget so we know what they're spending it on. As far as, we can't really cut anything from this, the library, take money away, and eventually reduce their services, because there's a law that you can't reduce the services for a library. You have to maintain the services at a current level.
That law was repealed 2 years ago.
Was it?
Yeah.
For sure?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to, because this is a different beast here, and I just want to make sure we have all the information. So, do we have a second to that? That law was repealed?
Yes, it was.
Okay, all right. Alder O'Connor, good. It's nice to have a library. So, Alder O'Connor.
I just wondered, Eric, I'm assuming if we have more children's programmings, that will result in increased circulation. It typically does. Would you address how increased circulation affects your funding that you get from other sources?
Sure. So besides direct city, the city allocation that you generously give, which is about 2/3 of our general operating budget, we receive 1/3 of our operating budget from the county. And there's this complex formula that the county has to reimburse municipalities for library service in lieu of having a library tax. And part of the formula is based on circulation, so items checked in and out, or checked out. And how it works, in a very simplistic way, is if somebody from Cottage Grove uses this library, Cottage Grove, or Dane County, is essentially will reimburse us for that use. So there's kind of a scramble among libraries to go after non-resident usage. Currently, non-residents make up about 53% of our circulation. So it is a draw for people coming into the community. Circulation, as we've mentioned, it's flat to falling, and that's a nationwide trend. So the pie is also, as we've talked about, is not
So
getting
you all
any
go
bigger.
check out books before
Yes,
you leave
please.
the library.
Especially if you don't live in Monona.
Do you know of that 53%? Are those primarily Cottage Grove residents who are
Actually, very
using?
few Cottage Grove residents use us.
So
We only
where are these people coming
mostly
from?
from Madison, some from Fitchburg, a lot from McFarland, actually. We cannibalize them quite well.
Okay. Did someone have their hand up? Alderwood?
I mean, the main reason I put this amendment in was to serve what's now, I think, an unfulfilled need on weekends and in weekday evenings in these service areas. But I did want to respond a little bit to Alder Bussey's questions. And as context, in the mayor's proposed budget, the total library expenditures would go up from $723,409 in 2014, up $5,000 next year. Now, the property tax part of that would go up a little more because we're losing about $6,000 in county aid. So the county aid number will, continue to go down. I think, and it's an important number in the context of the library's budget. It's a much smaller number in the context of the overall city budget. As far as, and I want to emphasize, Alder Thomas and I put this in proposing to pay for it with property taxes. But in terms of, are we putting ourselves in a box? We are sitting, and I think you know this, but we're sitting on an unprecedentedly large fund balance right now. The council policy is to have 15 to 20% of our working reserve for working capital. We are in the proposed budget, we're about $490,000 above the 17.5% level, or $356,000 above the 20% level. These are unprecedented numbers, and they're way much higher than they've ever been. And there are some good reasons for that. We know for sure the transportation aid is going to drop as we roll through that 6-year average of how that's calculated, and that'll go down. But as I think, kind of building on what Alder Thomas was saying, we will have ample funds in reserve if we need to carry it over until we see increased revenues from other areas, or if we don't, we'll have to make hard decisions. But it's not like we're going to approve something now and then turn around next year and say, oh, we don't have the money anymore.
Alder Bussey?
I just caution the reserve fund, you can't dip into savings year after year to pay for your operations. The operations has to be able to sustain itself. I think you proposed using some of the capital fund to pay down some capital costs. That's a great idea. But I disagree that you don't dip into your savings account to pay your monthly expenses. And this is hard. But I just, Mark, I don't know, I'm looking to you. I mean, how could we possibly, right now we're talking about the elephant in the room, and is wearing protective gear. We've got between these two positions are going to add $100,000 to our budget, in the next budget, and we can only raise the budget $50,000, and we're going to have healthcare go up $80,000. How can we? What opportunities do we have to balance going forward?
Well, we're going to take 50,000 of it this year.
Definitely, the next 2 years for transportation aid is going to have an effect on us. It won't be so much next year. should go down. I think I sent an email around 15,000 or so. It's going to be a year after that. It's really going to have an effect. We'll probably lose the full 10% amount with that. At one time, when I first started here, our transportation age was roughly around 400,000, even sometimes below that. Right now, we're at 800,000. So you can see where, that's a $400,000 swing at one time. That was a lot of the reasons for the increases. So it is going to happen where it's going to get tight. There is some things I know Alderman Thomas talked about with the TIF and the new construction, so stuff to balance it out, but it is going to be tight. And I mean, healthcare alone is going to be 80,000, and you could count the increases for salaries. There would be increases there. It'd be right alone there, put us over 100,000. So they will have some fund balance and reserve to pay for it, but it is going to be a tight fit in the next coming years.
Alder Thomas, then Alder Wood, and Alder Spate.
I just want your opinion about if you have what I would call hump year, where things are tight.
Yeah.
On a temporary basis, if you have an excess in fund, is it okay? Is it fiscally okay, reasonable to use a portion of fund balance for 1 or 2 years to carry you over the hump, if you have a balance there?
If you're able to fill that gap, that would be the thing. With that, you don't want to, in general, you don't want
for it forever.
You don't want to use your operating to pay for that because it's hard to fill. Because next year, if you use for an operating, say if you use 50,000 to offset just regular operating costs, next year you're already starting $50,000 in the hole with that. If you just look at just the library in general, from this year to last year, we were talking about without the carryover. Not that I'm picking on the library, I just want to mention it. We budgeted last year 462,000 was the general property tax. Now this year we budgeted 477. So right there's 15,000. You add another 20,000 on. That's 35,000 out of your what you're able to increase. So it does, get tight in there. So it does make a little bit of a difference. And with the aid dropping at $7,000, you subtract that from our aid number, or property tax levy number.
Could I ask you a question there? And this is kind of from left field, but it's about dollars and cents. A year ago, we did the RFID project, which was a substantial capital improvement that was going to process and take away the labor-intensive checking in and out of books.
Mm-hmm.
Are we seeing any as we're looking to try to better utilize, and I'm the first to think this is a wonderful idea to add this librarian, but can we pay for it from somewhere else? And that was one that I had hoped would be showing some return on investment.
Not enough to, not $20,000 worth. Where we're seeing about 75% of our checkout is happening using the self-service kiosks, and about 50% of our check-ins. My goal with the new entryway is, now that it's nicer, easier to use, that's going up. We're starting to use for staff check-in, as opposed to staff standing upstairs and spending 7 seconds per item. We're just feeding it in through the RFID, and that's a new process.
But in theory, will that actually save us dollars and cents because we won't have to be paying hourly people to be doing
In theory, sure. But I don't think it's
because I guess
going
that
to
was
be.
part of my thinking behind this, was that it was going to improve processes. I didn't mean to open up that whole can of worms, but it's one of the questions that's been in the back of my mind. Who was Alder Spate or Wood? Spate?
So just a couple of things. I mean, I think it's obvious from some of this discussion that there might come a time when some of the things we've invested in allow you to consider a staff reduction down the road. But I think you have made the case that we need to increase our funding in the children's section. And I just want to, or children's programming, I want to point out an obvious irony. In the First Amendment tonight, we voted to cut the Muffin Man. And if we don't hire a new children's librarian, we may be moving from Drury Lane to Dreary Lane. So, anyway, forgive me.
Whoa.
But
That is not going in the minutes.
sorry.
He's
That's
available
being-
nights and weekends.
I'm here for the laughs, so.
Future program.
Through the weekend.
Alder Thomas?
I have one last question, because we didn't talk about this, but I made an assumption that if you have this position, that it will allow others, you may have some staff time to do some grant writing.
Absolutely. And I think
Prepare
Karen,
for a future.
I think Karen can speak to this. I mean, she doesn't have time to pursue grants, and right now, for smaller grants. But you're right, if I have more people doing professional work, that will free Karen up, that will free myself up to do more development work.
So, and again, we love Karen Wendt, so we're not looking to expedite her departure from our wonderful library, but as this was originally proposed, part of the vernacular behind it was that Karen was considering retirement at some point in time, and this would better prepare us for that. So when that point in time, years down the road, happens, will there be a pickup then, or will we be back to truly replacing Karen and still having this position?
I doubt it. I doubt that. My
You
assumption.
doubt what? I'm
Okay,
sorry.
my assumption going forward is that as Karen advances in her career and wants to reduce her hours, this position would basically assume those hours.
So this will be a going forward status quo unless something's discovered
Right.
in the
The other, I mean,
strategic planning
the strategic
process.
plan is really going to ask some hard questions. What kind of library do we want to be? Where, if we have the finite resources that we obviously have, and we can only afford 3 librarians, how should we allocate that? Maybe it's 2 children's librarians, 1 adult, and then we start planning from there. So, I mean, it's not going to be, let's just add staff willy-nilly in all directions. It's going to be, I mean, I'm very well aware of the environment that we're in. So,
Further questions or discussion? Alder Holmquist?
And believe me, I know the importance of children's programming, and I completely appreciate the shifting needs of the library, but that last statement said more to me about this than much of the previous, of knowing going forward we might need to do things differently, and I might need 2 children's librarians and 1 adult. We know, as you kind of talked about earlier, as soon as you put staff in a position to shift that and ask for a different skill set, then potentially in the future, in the near future, is now we need to get rid of an adult librarian and hire a children's librarian. And are we really being thoughtful of doing the assessment and analysis first before we're buying a new resource that's going to be a recurring resource?
okay.
I think this is an important need. I do. I need to know that answer with confidence as I'm trying to help weigh out those decisions. If this were more, and I hate using these words, but more temporary vision with, we want to do the strategic planning, we want something for the short term, but it only is short term until we know better what it is that we want for a long-term vision. I see this as a permanent position that has the mindset that this is the way we're doing business.
Well, I guess in some ways it is a permanent position, because right now we have 0.8 FTEs in the children's room. Karen. The average Dane County library of our size has 1 to 1.5. So if we add a half-time children's librarian, we'll be at 1.3. That's about where I would want us to be, not just in 2015, but going forward.
Further questions? Alder O'Connor?
One thing, I think, no matter what happens with your strategic plan, you don't see you cutting children's services, do you? I mean, children's services is going to be the one constant. The strategic plan might involve making some changes in other services over time.
Right. I mean, I see children's services as the foundation, as the rock. When I always do the thought experiment, if you go upstairs 10 years from now, the children's room looks a lot similar to how it does tonight. The rest of the building is fair game.
Further discussion.
And with that said, if you have a 0.8 and you add a 0.2, it doesn't mean that you might actually want 2 0.7s, and after you've already committed to certain levels of FTE, I don't know, I think you potentially make some trouble with how to do what it is that you're trying to do through a strategic plan, is my fear.
Further discussion. Hearing none. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Bussey.
No.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
No.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to item 15-03 is to add $35,000 to be allocated by the council to carry out the direction of the task force for fire EMS coverage, brought forth by Alder Thomas. Does this require a second, Alder, or just
Yes, it does.
Requires a second for discussion.
for discussion? Okay.
Move
Alder,
approval.
motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and second. Alder Thomas?
First of all, I will say that coming out of public safety recommended that we add a seventh full-time firefighter. The mayor talked about having a committee, and so I looked at this notion and said, what do we do here? And I said, well, we don't have any fires. We can just get rid of the fire department. Don't need you at all. Does that seem realistic? I don't think so. I've personally been in Monona in my lifetime, 2 fires at friends' houses that were during the day, bad house fires. So I didn't think that was practical. So then I had to look at, is the level of daytime, I'm particularly concerned about daytime service at the moment. I mean, we have the volunteers at night. We don't have the luxury of having a lot of them around during the daytime. And so on the long haul, I think we have a problem, and I absolutely agree with the mayor that we need to do something to study what are we going to do. We're not the only volunteer fire department that's going through this stuff. I think many are. So I thought about this, and actually I have been talking to the volunteers and particularly the officers about this since last summer. And I have to say, and I should add, there's, I think, about 200 years of firefighting experience among our officers. I don't ever remember in my lifetime on the council having the volunteer officers so concerned about the level of service that we have and their ability to meet the community's needs. I have never seen them show up like they have and express the concern that they have, because they are truly concerned. And I have to tell you, I think they know a lot more than I do, and that makes me truly concerned. If 3 people show up at a fire, they legally, well, not legally, but by the NAFTA rules, they're not supposed to enter. They're not supposed to go in until a 4th person shows up. If the ambulance is out on a call, we have the chief, we have the retired officers who are around the city, Jeremy Small if he's around, but I don't know who covers daytime fires. So I am put in 2 amendments that would cover the city's needs until we figure out what a long-term plan. So the first proposal suggests $35,000, and I've put it to be allocated by the council to carry out the direction of the task force. One could assume this pays for 6 months of a of a paid firefighter or whatever else is suggested. And the reason I didn't suggest that we pay a firefighter is it makes no sense to me to have a committee when we've already concluded what the decision should be. But this doesn't work unless we also do 1505, which is put in money for LTE firefighters for the first 6 months of the year.
I'm sorry, I think you misspoke. But 1504, not 1505.
I'm sorry, 1504.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So 1504 covers LTEs for the first 6 months of the year while the committee is doing the work. And I have taken the money for that from, we've reduced some fire department expenditures, some overtime and some other things. If we have part-time people filling the slots, then we can manage that. Some of it is taxes, but it all balances out within the current allowed levy.
Alder Holmquist?
One additional comment that I wanted to bring up had to do with the changing nature of our surrounding communities with a lot of our mutual aid from Blooming Grove Department and how that is an ever-evolving thing that it looks like the chief is going to come up to speak to.
I did get news. The Blooming Grove Town Board did vote, and they have decided to rescind the acceptance of the offer from the City of Madison to provide fire protection and EMS to the city of, or to the town of Blooming Grove.
Which means what?
Which means they will continue to have a fire department.
Until when?
Until 2017. 2027, I'm sorry, 2027. That could change at any time. They could ask for another, but it doesn't sound like it's going to change anything in the immediate future. So.
Further questions or discussion? I'm sorry, Alder Wood?
Well, I guess for the chief, while he's up there, then looking at 1504, the next amendment, are you comfortable with the decreases that are proposed in that amendment?
In 1504, yes, with the addition of the LTE positions.
Okay. Then I guess a question for Alder Thomas is why should we wait to fund this until we actually have something in front of us from the study, from the task force?
If you, my response to that is, I'm a little more comforted because Blooming Grove is going to be there, but I'm still not totally comforted. And if you don't have a need now, or in the first 6 months, then who says there's a need in the second 6 months? I mean, do you know what I'm saying?
But isn't there, it's been decided there will be a task force to look at the quest of the staffing. Yes. So I guess that's my question is.
So if there is, I believe, and I introduced this because when I talked to the volunteer officers, they have a concern about the current daytime staffing level. If we have the truck go out, the ambulance go out with the 2 full-time paid people, we are very short on staff. And you can sit there and say, when's the fire truck going to show up? When's the ambulance going to show up? But I think, based on the conversations I've had with them, I think we have a problem now.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that, if I may, aren't you addressing that immediate concern with 1504 adding the fire EMS LTEs?
I am, but then what happens but that only covers 6 months. And you can't, we've had conversations with, and you can address this about could we go to full-time LTEs and would the union allow that?
The union would not allow that at this time from what I've talked to them. They would not be in favor of that. Part of the other issue with LTEs is with the Affordable Care Act, LTEs you can only work them up to 30 hours a week. So we're going to have multiple LTEs to fill the shift throughout. Part of the other issue, I think, with not funding this currently, it puts us another year behind.
Well, no, so we could come back when the task force has its recommendations into a budget amendment. And we
But
could
that's what
certainly-
the 35 is for.
But you're taking it out of property taxes now, correct?
Absolutely, because how else are you going to pay for it?
Well, if we came back with a task force recommendation to do something that costs money mid-year, we could take it out of the fund balance. I mean, I'm sorry, but we do have, the fund balance is by far the biggest that it's ever been.
I agree with you. Part of my concern was I believe we need to use the levy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so that's why I chose to do that.
I mean, I agree that we should max out it's such a small 1.14%. That it makes sense for us to max
So
that
my
out.
rationale was to use the levy,
Okay,
and it's levied then,
right.
but it has to come back to the council to spend it.
Okay.
Alder O'Connor, then Alder Bussey.
My question was about how long, what the plan was for the 18,000 if it was just for 6 months.
6 months.
And I guess, are we going to have a task force appointed soon, I assume?
Well,
Is that,
it's not my pressing item right now, but as I stated, this is gonna be beyond the boundaries of Monona. And so I'm trying to get an appointment with Mayor Soglin to see who he might wish to designate to join our committee, because I think we have to have the city of Madison involved in these discussions, and I want to have it in the front end rather than at the back end. So I just don't have a lot of time on my hands, I guess, is what I'm trying to make an excuse. Yes, I'll
I was
get
just
on it right
curious
away.
if it's
But no,
something
I
that was
don't have
gonna
this-
happen.
I don't have this planned right now.
okay.
Yes, Alder Bussey.
Mark, you're keeping a running tab, I would assume.
Yeah.
We had, at the beginning of the day, it was 56,907.
Yeah.
And then with 01 and 02, if 3 and 4 passed, what would we be up to? 55,594?
Added 1, 2, and 3, all 4. Add those 4, 55,594. So you're basically at
So you're at, you got $1,400 to spend for the rest of the amendments, right?
Yes.
Just one.
But some are reductions, I believe.
I understand.
Yep.
I'm just
Yep. Keeping tab.
keeping tab.
Alder Holmquist?
Alder Wood, his comment about kind of budgeting for the outcome of a committee is interesting concept, because if I go back to some previous discussions about putting the cart before the horse, you don't know what the expectation is. I do appreciate, and I originally support this idea of having that money available to carry out those responsibilities. Balancing that with the piece of, if 3 months from now, 6 months from now, that committee comes out and says this is what the direction we want to go, I think fits well with the argument that I was trying to say with the library kind of planning, that how can you put staff in a position until you've done your planning? So I agree in this spot of that 35,000. may not need to be levied this year, but used for fund balance, or potentially taken from a fund balance at a later date if it's recommended for change, and if not, then going forward it would be applied to the levy. Just thinking out loud of the two arguments that I've presented myself with.
But you want to use the levy up this year?
Oh, absolutely, and I think there are a variety of, and we might circle back to this, of a portion of this. If we get to that point, I would want to entertain that.
Further discussion or questions or clarification? Further discussion, Alder Spate.
I guess I would just make a general comment and then ask a question. I mean, what we're spending money on is a reflection of what we want to have in this community. We're building all these high-rises. What happens when there's a fire in one of these high-rises? I mean, are we just going to bank on the fact that Madison has, you know, a full-time professional fire department and they'll show up and save our butts? I mean, it kind of sounds like that's our attitude. We want the economic development, and we're building these, you know, multi-million-dollar homesteads on the lake to the edge of every buildable limit, but we're not going to have the services of an urban civilization because, you know, the State House in their glory has determined that we're supposed to continue to provide for our citizens without any inflation. I mean, I just reject out of hand the argument that we can continue to provide good services to the taxpayer at 2% growth a year. And while we're going to accept that limitation on our spending tonight, I think we need to be honest about how reckless and irresponsible that limitation is, and eventually educate the taxpayers in this state that we can't continue to provide the standard of living and the quality of services that we expect and worry about these limits. So I will gladly spend right up to the dollar that we're allowed to spend to provide every last service that I think our community expects of us. And I'll begrudgingly respect that limitation, even though I know that the majority of the citizens in this community would rather see some other things addressed. I mean, I have to say, the Parks Department needs more staff. We're building park shelters and, you know, doing a lot of great things, and we've got needs that we're not asking for extra staff tonight. But, you know, we have seen some real demonstrated need by the fire department and EMS based on trends and the fact that we have had a volunteer service historically. And if we don't confront those issues, we're going to have real problems. So I fully support this, knowing that we haven't quite figured it out yet, but I'm willing to put the money into it to be prepared to spend those dollars and it be levy dollars so that we can provide for our citizens.
Alder Wood?
I would second Alder Spate's comments, although I would correct him that we're only getting 1.14% this year, not 2%. I guess one comment specifically I would make, well, one thing I wanted to note is that the mayor's budget increases the stipend for volunteers by 34,000 or 36,000.
Increases it by 34,000 to 46,000.
Right, which is, I think, you know, a big investment in, let's see if we can attract new volunteers, keep the volunteers that we have, and compensate them. With regard to this amendment, I'll support this amendment. I think I would also possibly later be willing to circle back to looking at the funding source for it, depending on how the other amendments go. that we may need to use at least some fund balance to pay for it this year. Anyway,
I hear you.
yeah.
Alder Thomas?
Just sort of a general comment. We have, through the years, provided the best equipment. We have spent the money to maintain our own dispatch service. And now we're bickering about being able to have people to show up at a fire. I mean, this is, I'm sorry, that's how I see it. And I don't want to see it that way, but it is how I see it. I look at these guys, and it's not just about taking care of the fire. It's about providing the backup that they need when they go on scene to a fire. Because I can guarantee you, and now if 3 guys show up and there's somebody in a house and there's a fire burning, what do you guys do? Do you stand outside and wait for the 4th person to show up? I don't want to do that to you.
Can I make a comment on the budget?
You certainly may.
So the general property tax, historically so in 2011, right after I got here, the general property tax for both fire and EMS together was $561,705. The mayor's budget is $540,311. That's a decrease in $21,000 that the fire department continuously tries to cut back on their budget. At this point, we now need the personnel to do this. I'm in favor of 1, but I'm even more in favor of 3. We need one 24-hour position on each shift every day of the week so that we can get that engine out of the station right away. Right now, we don't have that ability. So even though we're asking for 1 right now, it's a Band-Aid for something that needs surgery. We need 3. And this is the first step towards it. And like I said, we have continuously worked on keeping our budget down, on increasing our revenues, and at this point, we need to do something about our staffing.
And that's fair enough. I just want to clarify your math exercise there a little bit with the budget. Your revenue, because of the good job you've done in increasing revenues through ambulance services, your billing on that is what's creating that scenario. If you just look at your, we haven't cut your expenses each year.
Correct, but we have continuously cut what the general property tax to the taxpayers has been.
Because of the increase in the billing revenue.
Because of the increase in billing revenues, and being wise with the budget that we have.
Right, but I just don't want the public to, you're not going backwards on that, but we've done nothing to take that backwards.
Right, it has not been cut, but we have been able to reduce our portion of the property taxes.
Correct.
Continuously,
you haven't got your
year after
unfair
year.
share, and you're asking for your unfair share tonight.
Correct.
That's fair. I'm kind of a stickler on I just do that to Jake as I cut his budgets, but I don't do that to yours. Further questions or discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call roll?
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 15-04, although it was discussed, I think we need to handle that separately. A motion and second discussion. Alder Thomas?
I've said it all.
All right. Anyone want to say more?
Can we get a count on the number, Mark?
If this goes through, you'll be at 15,590.
We're 1,400 down.
This is the one that brings us to our number.
We're already over, I think.
This is neutral, isn't it?
Yeah.
Neutral on the
This
levy?
takes the 4,800 from Muffin
For-
as the
yeah.
property tax.
It decreases.
For, okay.
Yeah, it is budget neutral.
Right now, before this amendment, we're at $6,113.
But even with passing this, would this not be neutral?
It's not neutral because we
48.
we used that 4,800, which was the savings from
Oh,
yeah, that's the only difference.
Okay.
So what's the,
So add, if you put the 4,800 in,
1,600?
no,
Above.
yeah,
are we still within the levy?
1,300 left.
1,300.
Easy counting.
All right.
Preston
My
just
math
gotta
is
pay for it.
lying.
I'm saying we're close to break even right now, so go easy. Where we go from here now, we're talking real dollars. Further discussion. All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 15.5.
Mayor?
Yes. What?
Roll call?
It has to be a roll call vote.
Every one of these has to be roll call? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, would the clerk please call the roll
Yes.
on that last?
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Motion passes. 15.05 is to decrease the fire overtime by $5,000 and firefighter recruitment / retention by $10,000. This would also decrease emergency medical services overtime by $5,000, brought forth by Alder Bussey. Is there a motion for approval?
Mayor?
Yes, Alder Bussey.
In light of 1504, it's already reduced those amounts. The intent was to assist funding of the new position, which has already taken place, so I'm going to withdraw this amendment.
All right, this amendment has been withdrawn. Moving on to 1506. Budget Amendment 1506 is to decrease the following items in the Parks budget. $2,000 from Parks overtime, $1,000 from Parks gas and electric, $1,000 from Parks supplies, $1,700 from Parks fuel, bringing that to a total reduction of $5,700, brought forth by Alder Bussey. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
There's a motion and second. Alder Bussey?
I had talked with Jake on this, and Parks overtime, he was, okay was the term I think he used, not comfortable. Some of the others, Lotus and the supplies and the fuel additives, I'm looking at Lotus not coming on. The concern was for utilities. By the time that construction's done, season's going to be pretty much over. Same with the park supplies for Lotus, and the fuel additives is tough, but right now we're enjoying some lower fuel costs. As I told Jake, my intent here was to prune the tree rather than cut it down, that we needed to. If right now we got $1,300 left, that's all we can spend, and if we're going to open up if anybody else wants anything added to the budget, this was an effort to, as I say, prune the budget rather than chop the tree down.
So,
I'm going to
is it your desire to keep holding your ground?
Yes.
To take
Yes.
these,
Yep.
so we'll,
Yep.
okay. Alder Spate, then Alder Wood.
Well, I just want to thank Alder Bussey. You're always very thorough at looking for places where we might have a little fat, and I know we often spar at these meetings, but I do have the utmost respect for you, and I just want to state that publicly. I'm willing to see us cut the $2,000 from the park overtime in the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish here tonight. I do think the other line items, we're likely to just end up going over budget if we make those cuts. I think those are fairly accurate numbers, and I hope we get lucky with fuel cost and we have some savings there as a community, but I wouldn't want to necessarily bank on it, but I'm certainly open to amending this amendment after our discussion to support a $2,000 reduction in the overtime funding.
Okay.
Alder Wood?
I guess my question was sort of to Jake is whether this is, I mean, we can set, a budget number for some of these expenditure lines at whatever we want to, but is it realistic to say, yes, we can do this? I mean, other than parks, other than the overtime, which we obviously can control that more so, I mean, are these numbers realistic in the historical context?
Yeah, the numbers that were proposed in the budget are accurate to what we've had existing, for example, gas and electric utilities, and the anticipated increase in utilities for new buildings at Lottis and Schluter. Park supplies number is, we were a little bit over what we had budgeted for this year, and looking at what we're going to have next year and years beyond that to keep that number whole. The fuel cost, this year's park budget had like $8,200 in fuel, and the recreation budget had $1,000. So what I did was just transfer over the $1,000 from the rec budget into the park budget now that they're all under the one umbrella, and then added some additional estimates for what the new parks vehicle that we're going to be getting through the capital budget will cost for the operating. So I'm fairly confident in those numbers that I proposed in the operating budget of what they'll be at next year.
Okay. Mark, can you tell us what page the parks overtime budget is on? I just wanted to look at what we've done the last 5 years. So
89,
I'm
Doug?
not finding it.
Look on the screen.
It's up there. Okay.
5,000 2011, 4,500 2012, 4,600 2013. This year we're going to check about $3,000. A lot of this too.
I can explain it. Yeah, with the changeover from the day-to-day ops from Public Works to Parks, we used to have full-time Public Works staff do weekend rounds, so they'd be getting paid overtime on Saturday and Sunday. So this year we transitioned into LTE, doing weekend round and shelter cleaning, and that drastically reduced the overtime cost. Also, my full-time park staff, if he has overtime for lagoon clearing, for example, or special events, he's opted to take comp time instead of overtime. So now that's one particular employee if that changes, but I don't anticipate having over $3,000 of full-time or part-time staff and overtime for this next budget year.
Okay, so reducing the park's overtime is not going to result in a reduction in maintenance at the shelters or other facilities?
No, I don't think so.
Further questions? As of now, the amendment that has been motioned and seconded is for the total amount. Any discussion on changing that? If not, all right, would the clerk please call the roll on amendment? Alder Holmquist.
I would want us to look at the items of gas or the utilities, supplies, and fuel and additives, not reducing those and only looking at the reduction in the park overtime given the statements from the department head.
That will require an amendment to the amendment.
Yes.
Is that what you're making? You're making an amendment to take out the reductions to park gas and electric, park supplies, and parks fuel.
Correct.
So all it would be was, well, not all, the amendment as it would stand would just be the $2,000 reduction of overtime.
Correct.
There's a motion to amend the amendment.
Or is it a friendly amendment that I can just accept?
You could certainly make a friendly amendment, Alder
We'll
Bussey.
speed up the time and say.
All right,
Yeah.
You're good at that, thank you. So, who was the second?
I
Alder
wasn't.
Spade?
I accept the amendment.
Okay,
Yep.
so before us is an amendment now, 1506 would be for $2,000 reduction of parks overtime. Is there discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
The amended amendment passes. Item 1507 is an amendment to decrease the pool concession expense by $2,000, brought forth by Alder Bussey. Is there a motion?
Question?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll move approval.
There's a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
There's a motion and second. Alder Bussey?
Jake, you said that this, you'd be comfortable if this were increase in income rather than a reduction in the expense.
Yeah, if you're looking to decrease the levy by 2,000 for the pool, I would prefer that you look at increasing the revenue projection for daily admissions. Otherwise, with a decrease in concession expenses and keeping the revenue line item the same, we're going to have to charge $5 for a hot dog.
How does that flow through, Mark? 2,000 in revenue, does that
He's going to cut.
do they really though? Does the revenue match dollar for dollar to the expense?
Most of the time.
Well, don't you have to spend the money in order to have something to sell?
Right. So there's a revenue line item for pool concessions, and then there's an expense line for the concession expense. And that concession expense is actual product. And so we also have a corresponding revenue line under the pool budget.
So the more you spend, the more you make.
Yeah.
Or
We go.
free.
Sound like my wife, no. Just kidding.
What's the income account line item?
For concessions is 120, pool 46,
So it would change from pool concession expense to receipts or revenue, whatever it's called. Revenues?
Right.
Okay, that's the, I would like to, rather than decrease the expense, but increase the revenue by the 2,000. And where are we on our big picture?
$3,600.
How much?
36.
134. 3579 before this. Okay.
Alder Holmquist?
When I look at some historical data from 11, 12, and 13 of looking at those line items of concession revenue versus the expense for the concessions, I don't think it's a simple addition up above in the sense of, I think if you are in fact then making it disproportional, you're basically saying increase the fees of all your stuff is what that is doing. And I'm not sure if that is, I'm not sure where that point is of continuing with fee increase of items is really going to have that return when we're investing in some pieces of equipment for that area and other components.
Yeah, my statement was on the pool admissions, because that's kind of our flexible number that we reduce. Yeah, pool admissions, yep. Is that if you, pool admissions over the last 5 years kind of has a cycle, and if you're looking at saving on the levy, that would be the spot to increase the revenue.
And daily admissions.
Daily admissions, correct.
Okay.
Alder Spate, then Alder Thomas.
I just want to remind the council that we do currently have a working group looking at our hours of operation for the pool, and then we also plan to come up with a proposed fee structure or potential change in the way we charge for different tickets and things like that, like the annual pass, so that our hope is to increase both revenue and use of the pool facility by looking particularly at hours when we have open swim and family swim and things like that. Our goal is to make it easier for different groups to utilize the facility. So that's a work in progress, and I would be supportive of this. That is our goal, after all, is to improve attendance and revenue.
Alder Thomas.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to accomplish. Do we really think the pool admissions are going to go up, or are we trying to make a number work? Because
Yes and yes.
Because why do we, okay, and the reason we need to make a number work is because we're going to spend more of the levy? Or because we don't? What are we gonna
Less
spend?
of the levy.
Right.
He's trying to,
That makes no sense to me when, if we think we're gonna be in trouble next year, we're not gonna spend the levy, and then we can't use it next year. I mean, that's, the logic to that escapes me. Because we're fitting a number, if it was an actual number that we thought was going to happen, fine, put it in. But I can move any revenue, I mean, Chief, how many tickets are you guys going to issue this year? I can.
enough.
0.
If we all agree that we want to not levy so much, then we can raise revenues if we think it might happen. I'm just confused by.
I'm looking to Alder Bussey to ease us through this again, please.
Okay. If any budget, you're going to have best guesstimation as far as what your income is going to be. If it's a desire looking ahead that there are additional items that you're going to want to include in this year's budget, we're going to have enough in the cookie jar to pay for it. And so if you don't have a desire to add anything more to the budget, then you can turn this down and don't have to worry about $2,000. Right now, there's $3,500 left that we can possibly spend. So I hope that I misspoke earlier. It was admissions. It wasn't. Okay.
Mayor?
Alderwood?
So, just a point of clarification, because the amendment before us is to decrease property taxes, Alder Bussey.
Say again, sir?
The amendment before us is to decrease property taxes.
Right. And what that will do is that will increase what's available for future, if anybody has, there are some items coming up that are going to require funding that we don't have right now.
Okay.
That's it. Mark?
Right.
Here's where we're at summary-wise, because it's screen. This is number 7 is where we're at. The next one is $5,000 for the next one, fund balance is for cable. That won't affect the general. This next one is $5,000 for sustainability. That's the one minus the fund balance, use property taxes, that would be affected. And the next two after that are decreases, and there's really no additions left.
Right.
Okay.
So the one fund balance you could look at would be sustainability.
So do we want to table this for a bit, or would you like to just take this to a vote? Okay. Is that, we'll just hold this one in abeyance until the end. And
right.
Come back to it. Yep. So let's move on to 1508, which is Operating Budget Amendment 1508 is to increase the part-time wages in the community media budget by $6,390 to bring the assistant media coordinator position up to 32 hours per week. Again, the funding source would not be on the levy. The funding source is from cable fund balance. This is brought forth by Alders O'Connor and Thomas. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion second. Alder O'Connor.
Currently, the mayor's budget proposes increasing the assistant media coordinator from 19 to 24 hours a week. This would bring him up to 32 hours a week. Will has come up with a list of all the responsibilities, both his and the assistant coordinators that he handed out before. There's just a tremendous amount of things that they're responsible for, and we're in the middle of getting this radio station up and going, and I think it's just too much for 1.5 people or 1 3/5 people to handle.
Discussion, Alder Bussey?
So, Mary, is this a position that'll be ongoing, or is this just a position that we need in order to get the...
We don't know,
conversion?
and that's part of the reason it is set up as part-time wages. It's not a permanent position at this time, because I think a year from now, we're going to have a lot better idea of what we're going to need in terms of staffing between the radio station and the cable station. We may need more, I don't know, but I think we're putting all this money into the equipment, and I think we need to show a good product when we go live, and we need staff time to make that happen. So
if it's going to be something that's ongoing, why dip into the fund balance? Because you can't do that year after year after year.
Well, this is from the cable fund balance. That's how the media department is funded, is from
So they would have...
the money that we get from UVerse and AT&T, and we get additional payments from them each year.
This is an additional payment that we would receive?
Right, every year we get payments from them.
No,
That's
not
how
an
we...
additional payment. The payments currently
They
carry...
Sure, we get a payment from them
There's
each
surplus.
year.
Fund balance for this.
Yes.
What hasn't been spent is in the fund balance.
Are we going to be paying ongoing wages by lowering that fund balance?
Are you going to pay for it next year?
Well, we will be getting more payments from the cable companies, which will fund this. We're also in the process of starting to discuss our agreement with the school district, because they pay part of Will's salary now. I don't know how that will end up. There may be changes there too. So that's why we're not making this a permanent position. It's for this year. We're going to use these hours and reconsider everything this time next year.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
Just update on the cable. Currently, as of 1/1, we have here $144,000 worth of fund balance. We should probably have net expenses over revenues this year, just because of some transitions, about $5,000, so bring us down to about $139,000. Out of the $139,000, we will be using that currently budget $55,490, but that also includes the $97,000 of the capital improvements. So next year, that number should be roughly down around $20,000, which has been the last couple of years. So basically, it is a balanced budget once you take out there will be it's going to be hit or miss next year, but it's going to be pretty close to balance next year.
With this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we are going to take out the $97,000 each of that.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Alder Wood.
Question for Mark. Would this at 24 hours or 32 hours, would this position be eligible for health insurance, and should there be money included in that, in the budget for that?
This position is not being considered a permanent part-time position, so it would not be included.
Okay.
Further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Spade.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Amendment passes.
Glad to
Budget.
help. I just stood up here and listened.
Don't talk so much. Alder. Good job.
The best policy.
Budget Amendment 1509 is to increase the funding for sustainability initiatives in the executive budget by $5,000. $10,000 would be used for the completion and implementation of the sustainability plan, the interns' wages, education and outreach, membership fees, conferences, and travel. Funding source of this would be from the fund balance, brought forth by Alders O'Connor and Holmquist. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Is motion second? Discussion. Alder O'Connor.
First of all, I guess I would point out that the committee had requested $10,000 initially, and that wasn't noted in the mayor's budget. I'm not sure what happened to that. Pardon?
It was a timing issue.
Is that it? Okay. So I know this sustainability plan has gone on for a long time, but we are just about finished with it, and this would enable us to, it's a lot, I think it was a lot harder to wrap our heads around it than we originally thought. There's a lot of moving parts to it. So this would enable us to finish, we would use part of it to finish that. We would like to hire an intern to work with Shannon on sustainability initiatives, partly on implementation of the plan. This person would also be editing it, so it's in a form where we could make it available in a print version or whatever. And there's several other things involved. Janine had an intern most of the time since I've been on the sustainability committee. Shannon also has a lot of projects that she's going to be involved with next year in public works, and so this would help her spending less time on sustainability. We also have travel and conferences involved with being a green tier community. So there's just a variety of things that this would take care of. I anticipate next year that this would go down probably to the 5,000, I would think. Brian?
Yeah, and just to follow up on that last piece of, I was trying to wrap my brain around some of this ongoing operational costs of sustainable kind of initiatives and how they kind of dovetail with different departments throughout the city and the expenses that go with it. And what I think is unique about this year's request is that there are still some additional pieces that need to be done that could be applied to the fund balance issue, because they seem to be much more of a one-time kind of to wrap that piece up, but the ongoing expenses of the 5,000.
Right. And that was my thought, to take the 5,000 out of the fund balance, the additional 5,000.
Questions? So what I heard you just say is that you think this could be a one-time expenditure.
I think, I don't.
You don't know, but.
Maybe I shouldn't be saying. I don't think next year we would be, I know last year we had 10,000 in our budget this current year, and I don't think we'd be, in 2016, we wouldn't be, because the plan would in theory be done.
And implemented.
Right, so I think we'd be going back to 5,000 that we had 2 years ago, so.
Any further questions? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey.
Aye.
Amendment passes. Amendment 15-10 is to reduce the transit advertising and promotions expense from $10,000 to $2,000, brought forth by Alders Holmquist and Bussey. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Is there a second? Motion and second. Alder Holmquist.
Yeah, this was initially a placeholder while there was some additional information being gathered, and as some of that information's come to light, I think it speaks a little bit more to this, the piece of the work that the committee has done in retaining an agency to do some of this work and the goal of that work. The reason this was originally brought forward was the idea of looking at historic dollars spent in this area, as well as the look of what we do citywide for advertisement and promotion, and the multiple the people that we would be advertising and promoting the service to receive many of our other materials and marketing efforts, and looking at are we having dual kind of things going on at the same time that we don't need to do. But as Mark explained, as I gathered more information, the piece of the state aid services as well as the property tax of that coming together to do the service. So,
Mark?
Yeah. Basically, last year, I don't know if the mayor remembers, kind of issued a challenge to increase the ridership to the transit committee. So we did have some money in the budget last year, or 2014, to kind of hire a consultant and kind of look into how to increase the ridership. So basically, the committee recommended putting this in there to once we get the recommendations from the consultant to implement the plan. I guess we need the money to see if this is going to work, and see if these. It's not just advertising, it's promotion, and it's just different things to make sure we get the word out and see if it's going to work and things like that. So I think that's the idea with that. As far as the funding is 60% is from the state and 40% is from the property taxes. That's all part of the grant. So the $8,000 is not all property tax money.
So Alder Spate?
I can speak a little bit further to these issues. I will just report, I mean, the good news is that, you know, our ridership has been up 10% for each of the last 2 consecutive years. So we've seen continued steady growth in our ridership, and that we have just now passed the point where we've had a little over 2 years of our new expanded route for the express service, and that initially hurt our ridership. But this year we are on track to have a higher ridership than any time we've had in the last 10 years. So that's all good news. We have spent this money this year with Greenleaf Marketing, and while we haven't yet decided what we are going to do to implement their plan, I will say that I think it is our intent to fully brand our express service so that more members of the community have an awareness of it. And that will be things like improving the bus stop signs and increasing their numbers, improving the way the buses themselves are branded and marketed. So, you know, it's interesting. I occasionally run into people in the community. I'd say every month I run into another person who doesn't realize that we have an express service to downtown who might use it. So it is a service which is still beneath the radar for many of our citizens. And we do have an influx of young families that very much potentially have the need. They want to, you know, a lot of, it's consistent with our goal to be a more sustainable community where we can have these one-car families with, you know, folks that are going to be able to utilize this service. So I think that we do need funding to be able to put forth this plan. This is not something I would anticipate needing years down the road. I see most of this money will be spent this coming year, and having rebranded, I don't see us needing that money for the next 4 years out. We then will be able to focus on the things we've already got in the community to promote our service.
So am I hearing you supporting this amendment or arguing against this amendment?
Oh, I'm against the amendment. We need,
okay.
we need
All right.
the 10,000, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alder, someone had their hand up. Alder Holmquist.
And Mark, because there wasn't some sheets explaining the spreadsheet, I just want to make sure that this isn't from a 2013. I think it's actually an ongoing estimated fund balance. Is that the $50,000 is currently in there as a fund balance item?
That should be erased.
Okay, that's old. All right, that helps clarify some things.
Further discussion. Alder Bussey.
Yeah, I think in light of where we're at on the fund balance and if to have the monies, you know, in there for this to, I know that I talked to Brian about sponsoring this, but I think we're in a position where we're going to be able to make what we want to accomplish here. So I would, I'm going to end up voting against this.
I will remove the amendment.
Okay.
Withdraw.
All right, so the amendment is
removed.
Okay.
And Mayor?
Yes, Alder.
I'd like to also remove 1507.
Is the second okay with
1507, we're not taking it off, so we'll take it off the table to remove it.
I think the second may have to agree with that.
And the second was on 1507 was Alder Spate?
Was Alder
Yes, I
Spate.
would agree with that. Thank you.
You take it off the table?
Yes.
And then remove it. Okay? All right. We are on track then to go to item 1511. It's a budget amendment.
Sorry.
Oh. Budget amendment to decrease yard waste disposal costs by $10,000, sponsored by Alders Holmquist and Bussey. Alder Holmquist, or is there a motion for approval?
I'll move approval for discussion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
All right, Alder Holmquist.
This is a similar one that, as there was additional information being gathered, looking at the increasing costs of our yard waste disposal and the infamous leaf collection issues. This in relation to the changing of our service, and I say infamous because I know we've just all been receiving emails, so.
I see no leaves in the trees, I see no leaves in the street, so. No issue.
Part of this had to do with the county eliminating their service or increasing their fees so much that people are shopping elsewhere to look where they deposit their yard waste and our facility for people to go down there and deposit yard waste. This in relation to even some of the other items that we've had on there, like our sustainability plan, of looking at how is it that we are utilizing services and spending money to get rid of items that most of us go pay for, including leaf compost, which is just amazing to me that we are budgeting line items that are roughly $3,000-ish to get rid of our leaves, to give them to someone else to compost, that most of us go out and buy compost to add. And I just found it kind of ironic that we're increasing a line item by a pretty substantial amount, and we as a city set money aside for this service, which I think is important. But I think it dovetails with our commitment to sustainability of how we as a city and how we educate our residents and businesses of individual acts that have a larger impact.
I do know some land by the Public Works garage.
I suggested that, but apparently there's a rock.
Composting, and dogs love to climb hills, so. Alder Thomas.
If this passes, we can essentially eliminate the yard waste program, and if anybody wants to put up with those phone calls, which is a very popular service, I mean, that's what'll happen, because and Dan can address it better than I can, but if this goes through, we'll have to cut that program. We can't do it.
And I agree that the additional information that what this kind of raised for me when I was looking at it, of the initial numbers given without that additional information, was to look at, wait a minute, what are we doing here? And then to hear some of the additional information and all the efforts.
What was this additional information that you heard?
About how much money we're spending to get rid of leaves versus other items, why we end up switching from a county to a private facility, of where the increased costs have come.
So do you want to pull this amendment, or you want to vote on it?
I want to pull this amendment, but I want to point out the connection between this and the other items that we've been discussing tonight, of how this is a direct
So are you
relationship.
accepting the challenge with sustainability to try to enlighten our residents to keep more of their compost?
Grass, clippings, everything else that you go see those bins full of.
Alder Wood.
I agree and disagree with Alder Holmquist. In my current residence, I don't have enough trees, enough leaves to bother with. I just mow them and mulch them right into my yard. In my previous residence on Thunderbird Lane, there was no way. I still did that. There was no way. No possible way I could have composted them all, I don't believe, or mowed them all. And I think for a lot of people in this community, that's just a reality. The only way to get rid of a sizable part of them is to put them at the curb. Now, grass clippings and that, I don't know why anybody would bother to transport grass clippings, but so I think there is a reason why people are putting their leaves at the curb. You got too many of them.
And then there's neighbors who have the world's largest compost pile. Alder O'Connor.
I just have a question, just for clarification. Does this number cover both disposing of the leaves that are picked up and the yard waste disposal that's at Public Works garage, or is it just what's at Public Works? I'm not real clear on that. It doesn't seem like enough to cover both. But.
I think there's a total of $20,500 in that budget line item. Roughly $16,500 covers the yard waste disposal and the hauling of that yard waste.
So does that include the leaves?
Does not include the leaves.
It's just what's at the Public
right.
Works garage?
The leaf disposal comes to about $3,000.
I'm sorry?
About $3,000.
$3,000, okay.
So that's for Royal, for the containers?
Yeah, Royal hauls the containers for us. And there's about $1,000 left over for miscellaneous yard disposal, yard debris.
A city farm, that's what we need.
Yeah, but again, it harkens back to, I think, why Alder Holmquist started on this journey to look into this. The county's getting out of this business. And they have the scale and the resources more. So that, I guess that would give me pause as to before we embark. I would like nothing more than to have a wonderful composting system, but I just have a feeling there's a lot more to be learned before we would dedicate time, resources, and money. So
It's all pulled.
it's pulled,
amended. Yep.
and the second agrees to?
Agreed.
All right. Good discussion, though. I think it warrants further thought. Moving on to budget item, our final budget item this evening. 15-12 is to increase payments on debt service by $100,000. This would be using the fund balance to accommodate that payment, and is being brought forth by Alder Wood. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Alder Wood?
As I've mentioned a couple times already tonight, our fund balance is at an all-time high, and not to belabor everybody with a bunch of numbers, but in 2000, let's see, the estimated year-end 2011 was, the fund balance was $977,000. This year it's projected at the year-end to be 1.4 million, so it's grown almost $500,000, and we're almost $500,000 over the midpoint of our policy. So we have, and I know we have projected future needs for this, but it's a huge number, really eye-popping, and I think we need to, I think we should use some of it this year, and I think we need to look at future years of what to do with it. I think it's smart right now to keep some of it back for, transportation aids will go down and so forth, but
because of the way you're deploying it, I am complete support of your amendment, because it's going to pay down debt, which is always a nice thing to get rid of. So, no pushback from the mayor. Alder Spate.
I was just curious, I support this, and I don't know, Mark, if you can shed any light on this, and I'm not looking to necessarily do it, but won't we in fact save some interest cost by doing this? Or do we have we already committed to the borrowing and thus,
No.
I mean,
There's, I guess, two ways of doing it. One was to offset the capital borrowing coming up, but I'm assuming what we're going to do is, because we have the mayor already put some in there, we're going to talk to Jeff, and we're going to target a couple payments and pay those off. So it won't affect the interest for 2015, but it will affect interest in the future years.
okay.
And again, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but I'd rather be in our position having a little bit too much in this pot than if you've been reading Mayor Soglin's response to his city council with where he is doing this exercise we're doing too, looking forward, and we may have more than enough than we need, but they are pushing their borrowing limits, and he already sees their bonding dropping, the possibility of it, and I think our position will certainly assure our maintained highest bond rating, which brings in those lower rates, so. All right, further discussion? Alder Thomas?
Yeah, I have a question. So, Doug, how much are you thinking would be available in the fund balance next year if we took the 100,000 out?
Once you make this entry, it'll be at 21%, 21.4.
I had put in 23, so this is dropping.
And the reason I say that is because, we don't know what's going to happen. I do think we need to be prudent. And, part of the philosophy of borrowing to pay for capital equipment is so that the people who use the roads, not this year, but for the next 10 years, all pay for them, that the burden isn't put on just today's taxpayer. So I agree with that philosophy. I also think that, I'd be more comfortable if this was 50,000 as opposed to 100,000, because I think taking it down to 21 pushes us, if there is something that happens, and we need something to carry us for a couple of years, it makes it really tight. So I'm wondering why you took 100,000 as opposed to another number.
If I had taken another number, I would have taken a higher number. I'm not sure. Our policy is 15 to 20%, and in the past, we always looked at the midpoint of 17.5. And we've kind of changed that in the last couple budgets where it's the 20% number is used in here. So, even at 21%, we're 3.5%. We can still do math, I think, above where we were. And taking 100,000 out what was the number you had, Mark? It would be
21.4.
Yeah. But our estimated the fund balance amount then would be 1,325,000 or something like that.
Yes.
What's Jeff think we need to be? Is Jeff comfortable? Would he be comfortable with us going down to 17%?
I don't think we've had those discussions yet.
I know for Moody's, they have our rating calls. They do look at that number, and it's a question they ask every time. And they always ask, what's it used for? And they're okay when they use fund balance for non-operating costs. That's one thing they really look at. They're okay with the 15 to 20% as long as we're following the policy. They're okay with that. That's our policy we're following.
So you guys are comfortable with that?
I am.
And that, if I understand it correctly, that number will grow or it'll grow or shrink based in part on whether the budget we're going to pass in a few minutes here is whether we are under budget or over budget at the end of next year. And that estimated year-end number will change as well when you get the real number in January, I think. In the past, it's always been higher. The actual numbers turned out to be above the estimated, so we may be even higher than this, but anyway. I think to me, it's either we're keeping too much money in fund balance. We should either use it to pay off debt or we should give it back to the taxpayers. And it doesn't really make sense with levy limits to say, okay, we'll cut the property taxes by that much. It just shoots ourselves in the foot in the future. So.
And again, I'm comfortable with the modified change as long as we remember Alder Thomas's words going forward. That
that's how we got to 23 whatever percent.
28, but couldn't quite get you to 30. I'm working on it, so I want to have a AAA bond rating.
It was about 7.5%, I think, back when Mayor Call first got in. So in the council, and Mayor Call made a concerted effort over a long time to get it up.
Their bond rating has improved 3 steps since that time too. And we're paying 1%, 1.5%. So there's a quid pro quo, but again, I'm comfortable at this. Yeah. Wow. Wow. All right. Further discussion. Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Bussey.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
All right. There's nothing left on any tables, correct?
Nope.
So we have. Do you want to we can keep going, and if you want to report. Do you have a number in terms of?
Final property tax number is $5,852,745, which is an overall increase of $189,332. Operating side is $112,363. The tax rates is going to be 6.00, a decrease from last year of 6.12. Tax bill from this year to last year, again based on 261 to 240, is an increase now of $97.53.
So you added
Can we get
$17.
clarification on something? You said the tax, something will be 6.00. You're talking about the mill rate?
Mill rate.
Mill rate.
Sorry, yeah, mill rate.
Not percent of increase, yes.
All right. I think you're all to be commended for, one, the discussion, one, the fiscal responsibility you took in this, also the awareness of the needs. I will, Alder O'Connor, start working on this committee, and I'm open to suggestions in terms of how we do that. My only requirement is it
I don't know anything about it.
that it be broad-based. And thank you, everyone, for your interest. No, you're not done yet. We still have you. We're not. You've been so patient here this evening, so thank you. Now going back to the original. Oh, before we did.
I just want to quickly say, I brought a sleeve of thanks a lot cookies here tonight, which I intend to share with everyone in the room. There are obviously not enough here for everyone to have one, but I figure not everyone's going to want one. I don't know. But before any of you leave, if you would like a thanks a lot cookie.
Thanks a lot right there. All right, there
I don't wanna
before
get
us
stuck
is a motion to approve the 2015 operating budget. Is there further discussion on the operating budget? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Budget passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Yep.
Just so you know, tax bills probably won't go out until late the first week of December. Probably like 7th or 8th will come out because the county, I don't think they even passed theirs yet, or they're going to pass theirs today now.
I think it's passed.
Did it pass? I haven't got a letter from them with the new amounts, but usually it doesn't. They don't open up. Tax bills go through the county, and the county has like a system you have to go through, and it's usually it takes a couple of days. So I would not expect them to probably the 7th or 8th of December. So
No, it
that's
seems like
typical
we're like
every
a
year.
week ahead of schedule right now. for
Usually
some
the
reason
first
to
week
me.
of first meeting in December.
Yeah, I think we're done early this year, so. Okay, thanks again. Moving on to new business, you'll note this item is starred for immediate action, which is consideration of Resolution 14-11-1995, is the awarding of a contract for community center entrance ramp and railing replacement project brought forth by the Parks and Recreation Director. Is there a motion to amend the rules?
Move to suspend rules, take this item out of order.
Second.
It's a motion, second, suspend the rules, take this item out of order. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is there a motion for approval?
will-
approval. It's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it would note how, when we request, I guess, a friendly amendment to this, that the amount be changed to $36,205. At Finance, we approve the inclusion of the work on the main steps and the railing for that, which was another $4,995.
Which is noted in your packet as an add-on. So would the maker of the motion
You okay with
and
that?
the second, are you both okay with that revised? And does the clerk have that?
Yes, I do.
recorded? Okay. Discussion. Jake, did you just want to give a quick overview as to why we're doing this now in the middle of winter?
It's a approved 2014 capital project, but with all of our other projects, this is kind of where it got slotted in. But it is a needed item at the community center to make it ADA compliant with the walkway up to the building and rails that are not safe according to our own local fire department and need to be repaired or fixed.
I guess we were facing possible citations, and also the city clerk said the county came and was not going to allow it for our voting purposes to the disabled to use the ramp because of the incline in the ramp, and they were going to have to use the elevators and everything. So it sounds like it's much needed improvement. Further discussion, Alder O'Connor.
Is this weather going to be a problem?
No, that's part of the bid includes winter conditions. They use heated concrete and concrete blankets. And it's going to warm up. It's got to.
Yeah, right.
Like in middle of December, it'll be fine.
36 degrees Sunday with rain. Further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Bussey.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Spate.
Aye.
Alder O'Connor.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Before we go, I'd just like to change the order. Courtesy of this gentleman who's been waiting for some answers tonight, of taking item 1 and replacing with item 2 is discussion of the property maintenance inspections. This was asked to be added to this agenda by Alder Holmquist, I believe. Alder Holmquist.
Yeah, so there have been...
He's here tonight too,
Yeah.
if there's any questions.
There have been a variety of folks reaching out to different folks on the council and the city as a whole of some of the changes given the passage of the ordinance a year and a half ago. And it appears from my standpoint, and I think from some others that I've had discussion with, that there may have been a different impression of what some of the side yard parking restrictions were, and some of the front or street side parking requirements were to be, and how that has been carried out. And so some of the discussion was particularly revolved around side yard parking and having to do with fully paved surface, and what the intention of this body as well as the intention of the Public Safety Committee was regarding that section of it.
So and were you here for this gentleman's public appearance earlier this
I was
evening?
not.
You were not here. So I think these are specifically the questions that he had about what's changed from what he understood the ordinance requirements to be over the last decades to now. So what was your hope by bringing this forth? And Jeremy, is there anything that you're just following the ordinance as it's currently stated, correct?
Right.
Jeremy,
You need
can you
to,
go?
you need to come up. You need to be a TV star.
I think right off the bat, I think definitions may be part of the hang-up. Like just Alder Holmquist just mentioned, completely or fully paved. Granted that in the ordinance it says paved driveways, but if you go into the ordinance, that also includes concrete, asphalt, brick, pervious paver, or similar surface. So it's not just paved. I don't know if that's part of the hang-ups that some people are having. I'm telling people that it's, quote, paved, but there are other options on there. I just don't know. Sure, thank you.
And again, your position is you're just following.
I'm just
You're
fo-
just
I'm
doing the
trying-
job. You're following. So
I'm just trying to follow.
you would welcome clarification.
Right, and I've talked to the city attorney about it, as to what he felt. I think we're following along with what the ordinance is stating. And I'm clarifying as people call in, what paved means.
And Alder Holmquist, you hope what happens from tonight?
Well, I think speaking to many of the other initiatives that we put forth, that we're in a position that someone that is storing something temporarily on their side yard, that we are not wanting to encourage them to make an impervious surface there for part-time storage in the winter months. And the way I think some of this has been interpreted has made the indication that they need something more permanently in place rather than the idea of, I have a boat trailer where I'm going to keep it from sinking in the mud when spring comes, but I'm not going to pave the whole side of my house in concrete. What's been sent out to folks from my understanding is that folks that have been parking historically on their side yard with a boat trailer or other pieces, that even if the tires and the tongue are placed on solid surfaces, that is out of compliance with the current ordinance. That is the concern I have, because my intention of side yard storage was to prevent something from sinking into the ground and causing additional concern of sight, which is very different than saying you need a concrete slab to put your boat
And
in.
who chairs public safety? Alder Thomas? Alder Holmquist. So you're the chair of this committee, so okay, that makes me feel better that you know what you're getting into by reopening. This was a long, perilous, as I recall. I didn't sit on the committee, but I remember it was Mr. Ament was very involved, I think, in helping draft some of those, and then they were filtered through the committee, and I'm not sure, good or bad, what came out of the process, but a process came out and a clarification, so.
I think Mr. Wiswell pushed things through.
Okay.
If I could add something to that, it does say a paved surface. It doesn't mean that it has to be concrete. It can be permeable surface that is laid out, and there's a lot of different surfaces out there that are permeable, and it can be done appropriately without laying a big slab of concrete out. So.
And I think some of that comes from, so if you have a boat and you want to put a paver underneath the tires and underneath the tongue, I was under the impression that that is sufficient.
It's not.
And I think that's where there's concern with how it's interpreted. What is considered impervious or a similar surface that would meet the acceptability of it?
Alder O'Connor, then Alder Thomas, then Alder Spate.
My question, because I brought this up to Brian, because I had a neighbor who contacted me about it, and he doesn't want to put any kind of surface. He traditionally, in the winter, in November, he puts his boat in his side yard, and in April he takes it out and keeps it in his driveway for the summer for ease of getting in and out. And he doesn't necessarily want to put in a big slab, pavement or whatever. And I asked Alderman Holmquist about it because I was wondering if he could use just pavers under his wheels. I mean, the ground's going to be frozen, but my understanding is you can't do that.
No.
And
The way it's written now, no.
at least the way it's written now, but I'm wondering if we can make some kind of change so that in the winter at least you can do that. I understand that we don't want to have boat trailers with weeds growing up around them all year and things like that, but I think there are a lot of people who just do it during the winter months, store their boats or whatever that way, and then during the spring and the summer they're out and about with them. They might even keep them in the water or whatever. So
I am more than open to reconsideration. It's just
has to go through the committee.
Yeah, you got to go through the process and put some very deliberate thought, because I know it was a long, drawn-out process. Alder Thomas?
Well, I'm not sure that what we have now is what we really want. People will say, and they've said to me, well, I've been doing this for years. I take care of my yard, I do this, I just store it here, I do this. Nobody said my neighbors don't have a problem, I don't have a problem, I take care of my property. What's wrong with it? And I'm hard pressed to explain to them why in a sustainable community that purports to support sustainability, we want to tell them to cement over their side yards. So what we don't want is them to let the grass, as Murray said, let the grass grow up. But I do think there's a better way to do it that may be more neighborhood friendly, that will accomplish what we want. I'm just not sure. What are we trying to accomplish with the current ordinance now by saying pavers? And I know you're cutting them into, no question about that, but we did that, but I don't know why we insisted that it had to be that way. Is anybody else?
I think Jeremy can speak to this more clearly, but if you look in your packet, there's several, and this doesn't even touch on all of them, examples of property owners that didn't just store their equipment in the winter. It sits in their yard or on a regular basis, and that's what we're trying to resolve, is to that's from what my understanding is, that's what the council approved in the first place, was to not allow that type of storage.
Chad.
Yeah. Chad, then Alder Wood, then Alder Bussey.
I want to agree to some of the other comments. Clearly, there's a disconnect between our desire to be a more sustainable community and our desire to make sure that properties are reasonably maintained. And those things are not incompatible. And I think that the ordinance as it was written was not mindful of those issues of sustainability and reasonableness. We made some rules that I think we clearly need to amend. And I would also just use my own example. In my previous home, we kept a pop-up camper on a gravel space that was not technically paved, but it was never unsightly, though arguably the camper was a little dilapidated. But, it would not have been in compliance with this ordinance, but the gravel was a far better thing to have than for it to be paved. It just wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't address the issue, which is the ugly camper.
Alder Wood.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of surprising if we did a major an overhaul of that ordinance, any ordinance as we did, and not want to come back later and tweak it after some experience with it. And personally, I don't see any problem with, the ordinance allows impervious surfaces, but really that means that a lot of it is, in fact, there's something there that is pervious, so it's a fair, there's quite a bit of it that's not open directly to the soil, some kind of pavers or whatever. So I wouldn't have any problem with seasonal storage on just enough to basically keep the boat or the vehicle off the ground. But, so it doesn't sink in. But that's, I guess I think the committee ought to look at, tweaking it where we need to.
I agree.
Alder Bussey?
I was just going to say I wanted to thank Alder Holmquist in advance for bringing this back to the committee and working on it, and we look forward to it coming back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That might be it.
And my 2 cents is, whatever you do, I'm fine with. It's just, whatever you do, we're going to ask him to enforce it. And I hate, get rid of our ordinances that we don't enforce, but if we have an ordinance, I expect them to be enforced by either Jeremy or the officers, or we shouldn't have those ordinances. And there's several that come to mind that way, that we have things on our books that we don't abide by. So I just soon get rid of them and just admit the fact that we allow bikes on the sidewalk on Monona Drive. It's just, we have these things because all it takes, and I find it very irritating, is when it's bugging some residents in the rules support why the residents being bugged. I'm hard pressed to defend. So I just want to get rid of those ordinances, or let's stand behind our employees who have to enforce those ordinances. And I do want to commend, you have a thankless job, but I want to commend you. And the reason I want to commend you, not that you always do what you do, but your results have just been amazing. When 97% of your contacts result in a very non-problematic resolution, and the very few that do get escalated all the way through. Have we had anything be thrown out because our ordinances were improper or wrong? Or?
No.
I know it's just very frustrating to some people because it's been that way, but I think for the most part, and I'm open to changing this one around if this is the hot button one. But I think there were some other hot button issues, and Jeremy, I'm sure, can tell you the ones he'd like clarification from the city on that with yard
Maybe that might
waste
be
and stuff.
helpful
Yep.
at the committee level, is to hear some of the areas that are either more fuzzy or there's more kind of pushback in unique ways that we might be able to give more clarity to that.
And I would hope you would be willing to host a public appearances time
Sure.
that people.
I wonder when Mr. Churn is available.
Exactly. Alderwood and then Pat. Okay.
And I just wanted to state, there are other areas that are being addressed at Public Works coming up at the next meeting. They are going to consider expanding the time that people can leave brush out. I know that wasn't very clear in the original ordinance, and staff is proposing that brush can be left out for 15 days or 2 weeks prior to the scheduled pickup. And I think that's getting more to the point of the original intent of the ordinance.
I would just ask, and Dan's gone now, but that the public be made aware of this when that meeting is taking place.
Yep.
Just so everyone gets a chance, as this gentleman did tonight, to come out and speak. Did your question get answered?
Somewhat.
Okay. We've tried to dance all around it, but you're fine, right? Well,
No, we can't.
yeah.
If I can just speak from here, that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. On the letter that I received from the city of Monona, was stating that it had to be moved from your front so that the property values will maintain their value and hold their value. It can be put into the back of your yard, your trailer could be, or whatever you had, your boat could be put into the back of the yard. For the time being, east or Monona, if I'm correct, that's what that letter did say.
That's true.
Jeremy, because I called you about this.
Yep.
And so they wanted to have the side views all clear and straight and everything else. And it either had to be on a gravel base, cement, whatever you called it, needed to be done. My concern is now, if I can put it in the backyard, that's fine. I'll be more than happy to put it in the backyard. Store it the way you like it to be done. I'll follow your city ordinances, but it seems like we're going to be in a gated community now, is what it's turning into. I can understand change, which is good. But when you have 16 feet in between houses and 18 feet in between houses, and you say people can store trailers and stuff, even though it's on gravel, I do believe that is a fire hazard. I would think it would be a fire hazard if the city or if somebody happens to have a fire and you have trailers and stuff that are in between there. I believe our firefighters cannot get through there to help certain housing if there's a fire.
See, I think those are real, and this is why I guess I would welcome, not to make you come to a bunch of meetings, but I think these are the questions that should be brought up. Because it sounds like Alder Holmquist is willing to open this up for what the best way, and maybe the best way is a different way than we're asking you to do it, so.
Because I just received a letter that
Yep.
this has to be moved,
Yep.
and I'll send out.
And that's the way the rules stand today, but it sounds like he's going to open up the rules, so I would think we would probably have a hiatus on some of those.
We haven't been enforcing since
Okay.
the first.
Since this has arisen, this concern, you're on hold from being thrown in the jail for this, so. But please, thank you for, yeah. The best way, it probably won't be letters to everyone, but if you go to mymonona.com. Oh, you don't have that? Well, then if we could make it a point. When does public safety meet?
It's on the
First Wednesday?
This Wednesday.
So that must be the...
Are you going to bring this up then?
It's not on the agenda.
No, you can't. It's not on the agenda, so
No,
it's
because
gonna
I was
have to be-
encouraged to bring it here first.
Right,
prior to
and
that.
we missed that.
Yep.
Yeah, we missed that.
We missed the previous date
Right.
on this agenda, so it'll have to be the next one.
Do you think you'll be meeting in December?
We don't know that answer.
Yeah, it's the first Wednesday, right?
First Wednesday, yep. So I would say the first Wednesday in December. And you meet where and what
The
time?
fourth?
Wednesday.
Oh, fourth Wednesday. Well, you're not going to meet
Well,
the
things
fourth
got
Wednesday.
moved because it was falling on Thanksgiving, that's why it got moved.
So it'll be January. So the fourth Wednesday in January.
We'll
You're not-
notify you.
Yeah. We have your
We'll notify you.
Chris-
We'll send you something.
Okay.
Yeah. We have your address here.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving back to agendas, supporting documents and minutes. Whoop, no, what, reports of the committees, I'm sorry. Is there anyone from staff who had anything they wish to report on tonight? Do we know how the newsletter's coming, Leah?
Printer this week.
Printer this week, so it'll be released first week of December. All right, anyone else on staff? No? Alder Holmquist?
You heard my report.
Alder Thomas?
No report.
Alder Bussey?
No report.
Alder O'Connor?
Sustainability meets this Thursday at 6:30, and there's an engineering committee of one of the radio subcommittees meets on Monday at 6 o'clock at City Hall for a demonstration of something,
Some equipment.
some software.
Alder Spate?
Nothing further tonight?
Alder Wood?
Library board meets tomorrow night at 7. We're going to have a demonstration from the solar panel folks of the kiosk that was part of the deal. It's part of the package. They're going to apparently bring in a model to demonstrate. You don't remember that?
Oh. Yeah, there's actually going to be an informational kiosk put in the
for the
lobby
library,
of the
right.
library. Yeah.
And CDA meets at 6:30, so, right?
Correct, and we do need both alders to attend, so
It's
I
gonna
hope
be
you
really
can make
short?
it. It will be short, yeah.
But said there is a problem.
City Clerk?
Want to report on the wonderful turnout at the election. 81.4% of residents turned out to vote, which is awesome. We were very busy. I think we handled it pretty darn well, but we couldn't have been ready for the 567 registrations, no matter what we did. So, but that was a great turnout, and the election inspectors are to be commended for the hard work that they do. The city is lucky to have them, and the chief inspectors for keeping it all going so well. I appreciate all of them from one end to the other. They are wonderful.
You've sent out, or someone sent out in the past, the Dane County percentages. Have you seen that yet, as how with our 81%, did we lead the cities in Dane County like we usually do?
I do not get a report like that, Mayor Miller, but I would guess that
Somebody-
Monona,
I've gotten it, so
yeah,
I need
it
to
wasn't
find
from
that.
me.
Okay.
But I would guess that Monona is typically at least 10% higher than any projection by the county. And I'm sure that the turnout in Monona was high in comparison to other.
It's wonderful. Mr. Marsh?
As Alder Wood noted, CDA is meeting tomorrow night. The main item on the agenda is to certify the approval of the redevelopment district, which the council did tonight. So that is an important step in this process. And then, secondly, the Ruby's building, and Chief, if you could stick around for a minute here, this involves you too. The asbestos has been removed, and we will be, they will begin to take that building down as soon as I give them the word. I know the chief wanted to do a couple days of training in there once they remove the gas from the building. The gas was being taken out today, so if you guys want to coordinate your training tomorrow, would be ideal. Otherwise, you might be doing your training on a vacant lot over there. Okay? So Yeah, we hope to have that down
I
soon.
think that will make a huge statement to the community that something's happening at the Triangle, and that was the impetus. And for those of you who want to do something before CDA tomorrow night, the Chamber is hosting their business at 5, their monthly get-together at Rutabaga, world's largest paddle shop, and headquartered in Monona. It would be nice to get people to turn out to. Sometimes Rutabaga doesn't feel the love of Monona, they say, so we're going to try to show them a lot of love tomorrow night, and you're all invited to stop by. That begins at 5 p.m. prior to CDA. That's all I have to report. I would we have one committee appointment. That's Steve Brzezinski to be reappointed to the Police and Fire Commission effective immediately with his term running through May 2017. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appointments passed. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Move adjournment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everyone.